Good morning. It's 10 o'clock, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the Textbook Commission's workshop. We will have a workshop this morning, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll convene our official Textbook Commission meeting. This is the State Textbook Commission for Instructional Materials. I am Vicki Kirk. I'm Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for Tennessee, and I serve on the Commission in the Commissioner's stead, in Commissioner McQueen's stead. I would like to welcome each of you here this morning. We appreciate your interest, and we have a lot of work to do today. I want to begin by introducing new staff, and then I'll ask the commission members to introduce themselves, and then I'll have some opening remarks, and then we'll launch into the workshop. We do have a lot of new staff. There are a lot of new faces everywhere up here this morning. We'll start, and will you please stand as I introduce you? Dr. Elizabeth Alves. Dr. Alves is the Assistant Commissioner for Teaching and Learning, and within that division we have the office that takes care of the materials work that we do on behalf of the Commission. Lacey Noel. Lacey is the Director of Content, and she is the one that keeps all of this together. She's done a great job of preparing for this meeting, and I think you'll find that the information is going to be very clear and well done. Thank you, Lacey. Lauren Bardwell. Lauren is Executive Director of Adolescent Literacy, Social Studies, and Instructional Materials. She has a lot of hats that she wears, including helping us across Tennessee understand the standards as they are approved by the State Board of Education, and also making sure that we develop instruments that help us align our materials that we adopt to those standards. Thank you, Lauren. Rachel Brew to my right. Rachel is the Administrative Assistant for the Teaching and Learning Division. Rachel also serves as Recording Secretary for the Commission, and we do appreciate all the work she does to help us stay organized. And finally, Joanna Collins. Joanna is the Assistant General Counsel for Procurement. She's our attorney on the Commission. She serves to give us advice to make sure we're following proper procedures and following the law, rules, and regulations that guide us as we do this work. So I'd like to thank everyone here. Now we will start with our introductions. We have a few brand new folks, and so please introduce yourself and let us know how long you've been serving and just a wee bit about your background, where you're from. Mr. Cagle.
My name is Frank Cagle. I'm the East Tennessee Citizen member. I'm from Strawberry Plains, which is you may have heard of Knoxville. That's a suburb of Strawberry Plains. But I've been on the commission about a year and I've been reappointed, so look forward to serving. And it looks like we've got a pretty good group here.
I'm Kay Kelsey, and I serve as the representative from West Tennessee, and I'm from Memphis. I'm a retired teacher, and I've been on the commission about a half a year.
I'm Neil Durbin. I'm from Dyersburg City Schools. I live just outside of there, somewhere out in the country. We really don't have a name for where I live. In West Tennessee, I've been on the commission for about half a year.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Parton. I'm the Director of Schools in Sevier County, and I've been on the board about 3 minutes.
And I'm Michelle Bowman. I'm a librarian in Sevier County Schools, and I've been on the commission about 4 minutes now.
Thank you, everyone, and we do appreciate folks that agree to serve on the commission. There's a lot of responsibility and work associated with this. These folks have reviewed a lot of material in preparation for this meeting. I just want to read a few remarks now. I would like to give everybody here an overview of this entire process, which begins actually with standards adoption. So I'm going to read that process to give everybody an understanding of how this works and who's responsible for what. And commission members have a page in your notebooks that shows what duties are assigned to whom through the law. Tab 2. Thank you, Rachel. As I said, I'm the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the state of Tennessee, and I serve here at the Commissioner's pleasure. I am from Greene County. I was reared and graduated there from Greenville High School. I worked at a local hospital in Greenville for many years before becoming a teacher. I taught at Greenville Middle School, and then I've served in Greenville City Schools as an assistant superintendent, and in Greene County as the superintendent for 5 years before coming to the state in 2015. I raised my family in Greenville, and I still live in that community where I volunteer my time and participate in church and family activities. My children don't live in Greenville right now, but I hope they'll move back. I have 2 grandchildren, and I'd love for them to live near me and to be educated in that community. I believe in the public school system there. I work in the Department of Education, and I am a Tennessean. The purpose of my remarks is to provide information for the Commission and the audience on the adoption, review, and revision of standards and the adoption process for textbooks. Let's start with the purpose of standards. The state, and by the state I mean colleagues of mine such as you've seen here this morning and many others who work on behalf of the department, the state develops standards that detail what students should know and be able to do, and that's actually done through the State Board of Education. So we partner with them, and they actually run the process. We assist. We hold ourselves accountable to these standards by summative testing at the end of each year. These standards reflect the knowledge and skills that we as a state believe citizens should possess. All standards are officially adopted by the State Board of Education, and there is more transparency now than ever before with our standards adoption process. If you're familiar, there's a way for everybody in Tennessee to log on and review and provide feedback and input, and that's a good thing. Standards development and review. The social studies standards were developed by a group of Tennessee teachers and approved by the State Board of Education. They ran the process, vetted the teachers who did the process, and then the State Board approved those standards. The contents in the most recently approved social studies standards are not new, but have been reorganized. Some topics that were taught in one grade are now being taught in a different grade, while some content has been integrated throughout all grades. The teaching of world cultures and world religions is not new. In fact, these topics have been taught for more than 25 years. Standards are reviewed regularly. The Tennessee General Assembly, building on the Governor's Standards Review process and in coordination with the State Board of Education, passed House Bill 1035 in 2015, which set out a remarkably transparent process of ongoing standards review and revision. Revised social studies standards were approved in July 2017 and will be implemented in the 2019-2020 school year. The review process involved Tennessee educators and non-educators reviewing both the standards and the public comments collected through an open online process. The review process allows for a thoughtful and systematic approach to revisions that will impact all educators and students. Standards are a list of knowledge and skills. Curriculum and pacing of the standards is developed at the local level through the creation of a scope and sequence of the standards, materials used to teach the standards, and lessons and activities that move students to mastery of the standards. And then finally, we have the textbook adoption process, which is the last stage in this whole process. Textbook adoption begins with a review of books that publishers put forward for a particular adoption. The review starts with a group of Tennessee teachers and non-educators selected through an application process, reviewing the textbooks that are available for purchase in the subject areas that are up for adoption. We have a 6-year adoption cycle in Tennessee. Once reviewers are approved, they are trained in the content or the standards and the process. The review is a 2-step process. Reviewers use a screening instrument to evaluate the textbooks. Books are first reviewed based on alignment to standards. If the book makes it through, if it's aligned to the standards, it is then analyzed further on indicators of high-quality instruction. If the book does not make it through the first phase, publishers do have an opportunity to make revisions and resubmit for re-review by the reviewers who initially failed the material. So they get to come and present that, and the reviewers look at their changes and then make a second pass at reviewing the book. Publishers are allowed to appeal the final recommendations of the titles that have failed the re-review of Section 1. The Textbook Commission has the authority to reject or approve the appeals set forth by the publisher, and we'll be listening to some of those appeals today. Once the books are approved through the vetting process by this team of teachers and non-educators, they are submitted to the Textbook Commission for their approval. The approved list goes out to districts, at which point the law requires local districts to establish local review teams comprised of community members, including teachers, parents, and subject matter experts, to review the books. They submit their selections to the local Board of Education for approval of the books for use in the district. All districts must adopt books, but adoption does not mean they must purchase. They may use books that were previously adopted and purchased, or they may create materials of their own. There is also a waiver process that allows districts to utilize locally vetted materials that are not on the state list. Waivers must be approved by the Commissioner of Education. It is also important to note that the process is very open, with all books that are up for current adoption available for review by the public. Members of the public may submit a formal comment regarding any textbook under review. All public reviews are sent to the publishers, reviewers, and commission before formal recommendations are made as per process for public review policy. And I want to make sure, I don't know that I said this, but once the commission approves this textbook list, it does go to the State Board of Education for final approval. So when we approve in October, then it will go to the State Board for their approval as well. In summary, I would say that we have a very open process for both standards development and review and textbook adoption in Tennessee. The content experts that are reviewing and improving these documents at the state level are Tennessee educators and citizens, and much of the decision-making resides at the local level with local educators, parents, and the public involved in the process. I'm proud of the process we have in Tennessee. I think it's a very robust process, and we at the department work very hard to make sure that we are implementing that process with fidelity according to the laws, rules, and procedures that are laid out for us and on behalf of this commission. And so now I will turn the workshop over to Lacey to educate us on what we need to know about today's meeting.
Good morning, members of the commission. I would like to thank you all for being here today. We had a couple of issues with the meeting date, so some of you just learned about it very recently. Do appreciate your time traveling here today and being part of our commission. So I'll start today's meeting with the agenda items. So a snapshot of what we'll discuss today in the actual meeting portion. We're going to approve the meeting minutes from the March meeting. We also need to elect a chairman and a vice chairman. We're going to hear presentations of publisher appeals and public comments. And then we'll have a presentation for a proposal to add special populations to the Section E adoption schedule. Some action items that we'll discuss is going to be presenting the approved list of textbooks as per the reviewer recommendations, the Section E schedule, the request for special populations to be added to the schedule, the Section E screening instruments, the evidence guides and transparency tool, and then we will also set a meeting date for the spring. Are there any questions? So part of our workshop here for agenda item 3 is the meeting minutes for the March meeting. Located in your binder in tab 1 or the meeting minutes. Does anyone have any questions or concerns? Okay. Next agenda item is the policy updates for Public Chapter 711. This was approved early spring. So the first policy update is how the appointments are made to the commission. The Speaker of the House is responsible for 3 appointments. The Speaker of the Senate, also 3, and then the Governor appoints 3 members of the commission. And then one appointment is reserved for the Commissioner of Education or her designee. As you can see in the graphic, the Speaker of the House appoints one citizen member from Middle Tennessee and also appoints a director of schools and a teacher or instructional supervisor in grades 4 through 8. The Speaker of the Senate appoints one citizen member from Eastern Division of the state and also appoints a director of schools and a teacher or instructional supervisor in grades K through 3. The governor appoints a citizen member in Western Tennessee and also appoints a principal and a teacher or instructional supervisor in grades 9 through 12. So this makes up 10 total commission members. The second policy update, and this is tab reference 2 in your binders, is that staggered commission appointments have been implemented. So citizen members who serve on the commission shall serve a term of 1 year. The director of schools and principals serve 2 years, and educators serve 3 years. The third policy update is that 6 members of the commission shall constitute a quorum for the purposes of meetings and conducting business, which we have 6 members today, so we have a quorum. Are there any questions about policy updates? Okay, so agenda item 5 is the official bid list. You will find the official bid list in tab 3 of your binder. The list of approved textbooks is recommended by the 71 reviewers for social studies, world languages, and CTE courses, which is our college and technical education courses. Career and technical education courses in the specific subject areas of marketing, finance, business management, and administration has been completed through the review process. And so what you see in the list is the titles that have either passed the review process on the initial review or on the re-review. There are a total of 18 publishers represented on the list, and there's a summary of bid sheets outlining the various title counts for your review. So in tab 3 at the very back is a color document for you that outlines how the subjects are broken down, the total number of titles, and online-only programs. The list of reviewers is also included in your binder in tab 3. We greatly appreciate the hard work and the time commitment that the panelists have undergone to complete this review process and to ensure that high-quality instructional materials are adopted by the state. Are there any questions regarding the official list?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have titles for everything that we're teaching? Were there any subjects that didn't get a title that was approved? Do you know?
I think every subject is represented.
There were okay, go ahead and answer that question, Rachel.
There were some world languages that we just didn't get bids for, so we didn't even have a chance to get a textbook for it.
So Lacey, are we having difficulty getting reviewers? Are we do we have an abundant supply of people applying for that, or are we coming up short?
So in social studies, there's an abundance of social studies reviewers. The world languages, because it's so specialized, finding reviewers who speak the language and can review the content, those were a little more difficult to find. CTE is kind of in the middle there. Just depending on the subject, depends on how many teachers you have available who are certified in those particular subject areas and who also hold credentials in those subject areas. And so we put as many as we can on the panel to review.
The reason I was asking is because on the world languages, when you've got two people reviewing all of the submissions that come in, that's a lot of power that goes into two people.
Yes,
So-
I understand.
I understand, you know.
If they disagree.
Right, right. And then you've got two, and they have a difference of opinion, that could be an issue. I understand not having an overabundance of Latin speakers who are going to review those three submissions, but it's difficult, I'm sure. Thank you.
And I do want to address that we are aware of that issue, and we're already planning for our recruitment for our next cycle so that we can get access to more qualified teachers to review the subject areas for the next cycle. So it has been something we're aware of, and we're hoping to address it for the future adoption.
Any other questions regarding the bid list?
Excuse me, but what's the distribution on reviewers? Do we have reviewers from the big cities or all the grand divisions represented? I mean, is there any kind of effort to make sure we have a cross-section of teachers and reviewers?
So that I'm not actually sure of because the selection of the reviewers occurred prior to my arrival at the department. I do know that what was really looked at was certification areas. So our reviewers, especially our educators, not including our non-educators, they are reviewing titles that they are specific to those subject areas or credentialed in, certified in. And so that's really what the first priority is making sure that if you're reviewing textbooks in that particular subject area, that you have expert knowledge in that content. As far as where the reviewers come from across the state, that I'm not sure of because that process took place in approximately December and January.
And I can speak to that a bit. I know that anytime we do competitive selection of reviewers, we do competitive selection if we bring people on to help us with any contracted work. So the process is competitive and rigorous, but we do give an eye to that. We want to make sure that everybody that we choose is not from the metropolitan areas, that they are distributed across the state and from urban areas and rural areas, from large districts and small districts. So it's not always the case that every subject will have that wide representation for a title, but across the board, we do make a real effort to make sure that
Well,
happens.
some of the specialized courses, you're probably only going to get qualified people from the major school systems.
That's
the
right,
Big
because they're
Five.
not teaching those subjects in other places.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll proceed to the next item. The adoption of the schedule for Section E. This is tab reference 4 in your binder. So with regard to the schedule, we have made some adjustments to it that I just want to make you all aware of. We are going to be adding additional training days for ELA reviewers in February. Section E schedule allows for more time to complete the review process as a reviewer, starting from April 15th through July 2nd. Reviewers will have all of that time to complete their reviews. All sections of the instruments will be due on July 2nd, whereas before, the reviews were separated into 2 sections, 2 separate due dates. Publishers are given more time to respond to the reviews and make content adjustments, and specific individualized feedback is given on the feedback sheet. So with the new schedule, we are trying to accommodate the reviewers and giving them more time to review the products, and then also to have more time for publishers to respond to the comments and the indicators that they do not meet alignment for, and then for them to have more time to adjust their content to be able to have a re-review. The publisher hearing has been deleted from the schedule due to the new feedback sheet. The cost of this hearing was not cost effective given alternative methods that we have for allowing publishers an opportunity to have their adjusted content reviewed. So with this item, they are not going to meet in person to have their titles re-reviewed. Instead, it'll be done on the feedback sheet confidentially so that the reviewers and the publishers do not actually speak or communicate, but their comments and their feedback can be can go back and forth between the 2 reviewers and the publishers in an effort to really get to high quality instructional materials. The commission meeting for the fall is recommended to be held in late September to ensure all appointments are made to the commission. The follow-up meeting would take place in early October, and state board will also take place in mid to late October. And then we have some recommended commission meeting dates for the spring of March 26th through the 28th. We looked at your respective districts to see when spring breaks were, and these were some available dates that didn't seem to interfere with each of your district's spring breaks. Are there any questions to the schedule? Okay, if there's no questions, Ms. Lauren Bardwell will move to the next item.
Good morning, Commission. As Dr. Kirk alluded to, my team specifically supports standards implementation in the classroom, and so I will be speaking to the future as we look forward to what the next materials on the next adoption cycle and how they'll be aligned to our standards. So if you will look at your at tab 5, we have an example of the screening instrument that our reviewers will use to evaluate the materials for English language arts. And I do want to point out, English language arts will be a unique adoption next year because it's the first time that we are not adopting separate reading and writing programs. We now have integrated English language arts standards, meaning that in one single cohesive class, students will be learning reading, writing, foundational skills, listening, and speaking. And because of this change to the standards, we now have a much more robust screening instrument as much as more robust materials that they will be reviewing. So it is a unique change and one that we're very excited about for our students. So these instruments are developed in collaboration across many departments at the, many divisions and teams at the department. We worked with the early literacy team, with the college, career, and technical and education team, as well as others to vet our screening instruments to make sure they measure what we want them to measure. And we're very proud of the work on this. And so I will briefly go through the screening instrument for grade 1 so you have an understanding of how they work. So for section 1, we are evaluating the materials based on their adherence to the instructional shifts for English language arts. And with these new, more rigorous standards, we actually can summarize what are some of the big buckets of what will change in the classroom because of these standards. And one of them is intentional knowledge building. We want our students to be able to walk away from their English language arts class having read texts that build their knowledge about the world. And that's the first indicator that we'll be looking for in these materials. Our second big shift is the text complexity shift. And we know that our students need to be reading complex texts that are on grade level. Several studies have been conducted in the past about instructional materials not having those texts that meet the level they need to. In fact, I believe one study showed that in a 12th grade instructional materials, they were reading about 300 Lexile points below what they would need to access at the college level. So there's been a major gap of what we expected of students in the K-12 continuum versus what they would be needing in college and even in career. So we're really looking for more complex texts that are worthy of students' time and attention. And then the final shift is the evidence component. And before, we have asked students a lot of time what they feel about a topic. And while we enjoy reading those kind of responses, they aren't necessarily preparing students for what it is that they'll be doing in college and career, and that is citing evidence from text to support their reasons. And that is another major shift within the standards, because now students will have to point to the text and explain why this piece of evidence supports their idea. So those are the major shifts that have come with the new standards, and that is section 1. In section 2, you'll actually find a list of every single standard for that grade level. And we, like as I said earlier, have integrated those standards. So you'll see foundational literacy standards, followed by the reading standards, the writing standards, and the speaking and listening standards. So reviewers will be looking through these materials to make sure that each standard is taught to the full breadth and depth of that standard. And I should have pointed out earlier, at the end of each section, you'll actually see a red and a green colored section on the indicator. We actually added this to improve the accuracy of our process so that the reviewers can count how many indicators they checked yes on, and we capture that in the summary. And then our next section is high quality instruction, and that's your purple table on this instrument. And this really helps the reviewers understand, well, they've met the expectation, the standards, but how does that look for how the students can meet those expectations? So this includes teacher supports, assessments, and other ways that these standards are delivered in the classroom. And then for grade 1, I'm now at the pink table. Kindergarten through grade 5 have a unique section of the standards that focuses on foundational skills. And these are the skills that students must master in those early grades so that they can be reading on grade level as they get to the upper grades. You won't see this section in the screening instruments for grade 6 or above. And then finally, in our gray table, we have the additional components. Now, these are not requirements for materials, but they are nice to haves. Districts look at these indicators as they make purchasing decisions, and our reviewers will be evaluating the materials for these components, yet they won't prevent a textbook or other instructional materials from making it onto the official list. I know that was a lot of information, and I still have a few more screening instruments to discuss with you, but I will be happy to take any questions you have now about the screening instrument.
Is there anywhere in the instrument section 2 it could be in? It could be in 3, it could be in 4, where there's actual support for read alouds that are beyond the reading ability of the students to challenge them and the rigor in that?
I'm very impressed with your early literacy knowledge there, Mr. Durbin.
Thank you.
Yes, actually, I
I'm a
shouldn't
social studies teacher, by the way.
and your blue table, actually at the very beginning, for the early grades, we do have indicator D that talks about the read aloud and grades 1 through 3 being above grade level so that students have access to that text as they're listening to text, and as their reading comprehension develops and they can do it independently, you'll see that component phased out in the upper grades. But yes, the instructional material section does address how that can be done in the classroom. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but the department released a resource called Teaching Literacy in Tennessee about 2 years ago that showcased what high-quality instruction should look like in the kindergarten through 3rd grade band. And we worked with the team that developed that resource to create this section of the screening instrument. So what has been previously messaged with Tennessee and early literacy is captured in our screening instrument.
So that would be a part of the entire packet that the publishers would produce, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, because that's a terribly important part of that packet.
you're correct. It is terribly important. We want to make sure our materials have it.
Publishers, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions about the grade 1 instrument for English language arts?
Just a comment, Lauren. So Lacey mentioned that we're adding 2 extra days of training for the ELA reviewers, and I think you can see why. This is going to be a lot of work for the reviewers, and so we're beginning now to recruit and think about who's going to do this, but it will take some time to go through this instrument and do it well.
In those early grades, that's a paradigm shift that's immense.
Yes, and we will be grade banding our training for the reviewers so that the early grades will get extra emphasis, especially in that foundational skills section of the instrument. Okay, I will move on to the grade 7 instrument. It's behind the orange divider. And I won't go into this one as specifically because it is very similar to the grade 1 instrument, minus that foundational skills section. However, several of the indicators have been revised to make sure they're appropriate for students in the upper grades. And we're really looking for things that are engaging for students and relevant to their lives. We know that teenagers aren't necessarily always receptive to their reading classes or their English language arts classes. And so there are indicators in here that try to engage students in that high quality instruction so that they are fully immersed in what they're doing in the classroom. So again, it's very similar to grade 1. We just wanted to have an example for you to reference. Behind the yellow tab is one of our instruments for an elective course. So State Board adopts the standards as well as for English language arts, as well as the standards for the high school electives that have been approved. And this is an example screening instrument for genre literature, where the teacher can select any genre that he or she wants to teach in this course, but these are the standards and the expectations for that course. It is a much shorter instrument, but it follows the same flow and the same sections of the other instruments. And just for some context, we have instruments for mythology, for etymology, speech and communications, journalism, and other English language arts related courses. And to the earlier discussion, we hope that all of these electives will have publishers bid materials for, so that our students taking the elective courses can have access to high quality instructional materials.
I'm really sorry to get way out of sequence here. Is that all right? Okay, on the world languages, we don't have anything in here for sign, which is approved as a language? Is that in another field, or do we not have a material for that?
Are you referring to sign language?
Yes, ma'am.
No, we do not have any textbooks that were bid for sign language.
And we tried, and there just weren't any?
Correct.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I think that's going to be immensely popular if we can get the teachers that are approved to do that. Okay, thank you.
Please don't apologize. We like these questions. And then behind the green divider is an example of one of our college, career, and technical education screening instruments, and this one in particular is for the culinary classes. On next year's adoption, we'll also have courses in law, hospitality, tourism, security, and corrections. So this is just one example of those instruments, but they all follow the same structure. Alignment to standards. Section 2 for them is the yellow section. It's rigor, which is very similar to our high quality instruction component for the ELA. Their purple section specifically addresses those post-secondary and career readiness skills that students will need, including technical skills as well as 21st century skills. So you'll see a lot of materials that focus on digital readiness, as well as the ability to filter all the information coming to you. So information is very easy to find these days. Our students need to know how to filter that information as an example of a 21st century skill. And then their instrument also includes those additional components. They're slightly different than the other ones, and they don't prevent any material from making the list, but they're nice to haves as districts make their purchasing decisions. And again, I'll reiterate, we have an instrument for every single subject in every grade level. So there are quite a few courses that we develop these instruments for. And my colleague, Allison Gauld, who will be up here shortly to speak about special populations, her team has created an instrument for those courses as well. So she'll be digging into that a little bit with you. Any questions about the screening instruments for English Language Arts or CTE? Okay, we'll turn to tab 6 now. And this is something that we are proposing that you approve in concept. It has not been fully developed, but as Dr. Kirk previously alluded, this instrument is very robust, and our reviewers are going to have quite a task in front of them to evaluate these materials for every indicator. So for the core English Language Arts class, we are proposing to develop an evidence guide that helps the reviewers find the information that they're looking for as evidence of the materials meeting that indicator on the screening instrument. It seems that, I'll back up just a little bit. Every program is organized in a different way. So if a teacher's familiar with the program, it's easy for them to find the information that they need. However, if it's not a familiar program, and if it's, a lot of times this is even more difficult with digital programs where you're not flipping through the book but having to click on different modules, we're trying to think of all the different questions the reviewers can ask themselves and all the different places they can look in order to find evidence for that indicator. So this will be a way to assist them, and we are wanting to create a table for each indicator, and this will be something that we would train the reviewers on during those 4 days of training. The 2 additional days we're adding for the ELA reviewers to help them be able to use the instrument effectively and provide effective feedback for the publisher to make any revisions that need to be made. We've included a sample of what that would look like, but again, we have not developed them for every single indicator because I've counted on the grade 1 indicator, the grade 1 instrument, there are over 100 indicators that we would need to develop an evidence guide for. So if we get approval from you all, we will move forward with that development.
So if we approve that, we're approving the process to continue, but then there'll be another there'll be another approval once
You-
it's
We'll be able to
completed?
bring back the full document, but we are asking for you to approve it in concept today.
So we assume you don't want to do it on spec.
Right now, we don't have the capacity to do it on spec, but I wish that we could have. Any other questions on the evidence guide? If not, I'll ask you to turn to tab 7. And this is another document that we're asking for you to approve in concept. This is what we're referring to as a transparency tool. As I previously alluded, there are 100 indicators or more on some of these English language arts instruments. And while all comments are publicly accessible, we are wanting to have 5 reviewers on each of the core ELA programs, and that would mean that districts would need to review 500 different comments before they make their purchasing decisions. So we want to take a little bit of work off of those districts by creating a summary of what are the strengths, what are the areas of improvement, and where are the gaps in these materials so that they can reference. Our team will take a look and consolidate all of the comments into a synthesis form so they have easy access as they're looking through all the different materials that they can adopt. However, you'll see that even though we're proposing to synthesize this for districts, it still follows the same structure of the screening instrument, where we synthesize the shifts in instruction, the standards, high quality instruction, foundational skills, and the additional components on the back. Any questions about the transparency tool?
The transparency tool, is that something that the department does, the reviewers do? Who actually would input the data into
That's an
that?
excellent question. So it would not be one of the reviewers themselves because we want an unbiased outsider looking in, and so we would actually contract with someone, and we would work with them in the process of doing it. We would like to do it ourselves, but capacity is another issue. My background is in literacy, and I have 2 other team members on my team that do it, but that would be a lot of reviews for 3 people to do in a timely way. But we would train the writers, that's the role we're calling the writers, on the instruments, the evidence guides, and how they can synthesize the reports from the reviewers. But it would not be a reviewer themselves. In fact, we would like someone who is not familiar with the materials to do it so they can give impartial feedback. They're just looking at the reviewer's comments, and they're not putting any of their own experience with the materials on the tool. Okay, if there are no other questions about the transparency tool, I will turn it back over to Lacey.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a price decrease from Great Minds. So according to our bid corrections policy 2.5, requests to offer prices lower than those listed on the submitted bid will be considered. Great Minds is requesting to lower their price on their Eureka Math digital suite, 1-year subscription from $175 to $99. In tab 8, you will see their formal letter. Are there any questions?
Lacey, this is just a quick clarification. So if the price decreases for items that are currently under contract rather than a bid that's before us today, the authority for making the price decrease is actually the contract term. So there's a term in all of our publisher contracts that says that if they offer their materials lower elsewhere, that they have to notify the commission. And so just a quick clarification in the materials that the authority for changing it would be the contract terms and not the bid corrections policy.
So if I understand you, they probably had to lower the price somewhere else, therefore they have to give us that price.
Right, so under the contract terms, if they offer the prices lower elsewhere, then they have to notify the state of Tennessee, and then those lower prices are incorporated into the contract.
For clarity in the note that they've got there, we've got September the 1st, but there's no year on there. I was looking at the bottom, that we don't have anything on there to designate a year.
Okay, that I can have Great Minds resubmit this letter with the date on it. Okay, the next item is going to be Miss Allison Gold speaking about special populations being added to the Section E schedule.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to speak with you today. I would like to talk about adding some materials to your section. I think special populations might be a little misleading. They're actually alternate academic instructional materials. So you had the clicker. Perfect. Okay. So what I would like, and we might need to make that proposal that we call them, AIMS is my term, moving forward to prevent any confusion in the field. But I'd like to talk to you about adding these materials for two really important reasons, and these are things that have occurred in the state recently. One of those is our alternate academic diploma policy that was approved January 26th of 2018, really just 8 months ago. And then true access and participation and rigorous instruction aligned to grade level standards. As Mr. Durbin already said, there are some paradigm shifts occurring in instruction, and really this is in response to a quite substantial paradigm shift for a population of our students. To really help understand why this is important, the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the alternate academic diploma policy that was approved. That should be in your packet in the front cover pocket. That is, the high school policy 2.103 was updated. This is in direct response to ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. There were changes in that federal act, which is the reauthorized version of our Elementary and Secondary Education Act, that specifically for the very first time spoke to a population of students that really hasn't been part of our all when we talk about all means all. And that is our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities that are taking our alternate assessments for the state assessment. They are not taking TN Ready or EOC, given the impact from their disability. And this policy, ESSA, said, you know what, these students are amazing, they're incredible, they are doing incredible things and learning incredible things, and they need to be counted in our graduation rate. And they gave states that option. In Tennessee, we said, absolutely, you are right, we are committed to all means all, and so we quickly made this happen. While I say quickly, it was not without a lot of work. There was a huge commitment. And so in that policy, you will see that there are actually 5 requirements for students to receive this diploma. Those requirements are the number 3 and 4 that you'll see on there really are that students should get this option for a diploma regardless of their IEP. IEP doesn't determine it. But the big requirements are that students need to be participating in the alternate assessment, and that this needs to be aligned to our diploma options, our graduation requirements in the state of Tennessee. Our graduation requirements are 22 credits plus ACT or SAT. So in parallel for ACT and SAT, which is preparing students for post-secondary, we have the transition requirement, which you'll see is number 5. But the big thing is that 22 credits. That's the real work of this policy, and I will say that is where all of my time has pretty much been spent since this policy, because the question was, if they could have earned the 22 credits, why wouldn't they earn the regular diploma? So the real work is defining those 22 credits and what that looks like for our students with the most significant disabilities. And it's really about that work that this proposal that I have in front of the Textbook Commission today is so incredibly important. Because we have developed for these students several things, but one of the first things we needed to do was truly understand and identify who these students are. These students are students on the alternate assessment. What that means, and you can see by this slide up there, is that they met 3 federal criteria. They have to meet all 3 of these criteria. The students I'm talking about today have the most significant cognitive disabilities in our schools. They make up about 1.5% of our population. We're trying to get to where we're really using these incredible great resources that you have approved for general ed so that we can get that to about 1% of our population. These are students who not only have that significant cognitive disability, but have a significant adaptive behavior disability. That means the ability to live independently, to communicate with people what's in your head, heart, and mind, your ability to make those decisions when you need to be safe, the motor skills, all of that. These are also part of the criteria, and this is really what speaks to the Textbook Commission today, and it's part of the paradigm work we're doing, is they have to show that they have been receiving instruction aligned to standards. They have to have evidence that these students have been. And they have to show that that instruction has supported them, really derived from those standards across all 4 subjects. At this point in time, we have teachers absolutely committed to making that happen, but they have no materials to make that happen. For many of these students, most of their instruction occurs within a special education setting. That special education teacher is teaching them English language arts, math, science, social studies, communication, language, motor skills, fine and gross, independent skills, transition skills, post-secondary readiness. You can see it goes on. And they're doing all that in 7.5 hours a day, often wearing latex gloves to make sure that everybody's safe, right? That's what my job was. I did that job for more than 2 decades proudly and loved every moment. But I will say that those teachers are doing all of that for all of these students. And they're doing it with minimal to no materials, because the materials that you have adopted that are amazing, no matter how much we accommodate and modify, no matter how much work we put in, are not truly accessible. Yes, the students can have them in their hands or in their lap. That doesn't mean they're interacting with them. And it doesn't mean they're learning from them. So that teacher is creating all of those materials every single day. And the fact is, even with the best teacher and the best of plans, they cannot do all of that with the high level of fidelity and rigor that we genuinely want for our students. Even as that teacher who's done it, I will tell you there are many times, in many ways, I failed those students in having those materials. What you end up doing is Google searches. And while you find something to do, it doesn't mean it was wonderful learning. So that's really what we're talking about. And that goes on to criteria 3, which I think is really, really important. It's a criteria that's often misunderstood. Here's the big piece of it. If you look at the screen, I've highlighted the parts of that criteria that really tell you how big a deal this is for those teachers. Because not only are they creating materials in all of those subjects, English, language arts, math, science, social studies, they are also having to do so in a way that each of the students receives their extensive, direct, individualized, substantial supports. It is a daunting task for the teachers, but it is one that needs to be done because these students can and will learn. They don't learn the same, they learn differently. They don't learn less, they learn different. And so making that happen and ensuring that these teachers have that opportunity is part of why I'm here. But as you saw in the policy, the criteria, those 22 credits, and we come back to it, we know that that 22 credits means that instruction needs to occur. But the other thing we needed to do was we needed to help identify what that really means As someone who taught for over 2 decades this population and still genuinely is completely passionate about this population, I will say the hardest part of teaching is that we would get standards and they would say that your students need modifications of that, but nobody told you what that was. So you just sort of guess. You never had a mark. The beauty of this policy of the alternate academic diploma is we were able to genuinely define for teachers, what is that? What is modified, derived from aligned standards for students with significant cognitive disabilities and complex needs? And what we did is we created course requirements. And we have 16 courses in high school, all of the academic, so 4 English language arts, there are 4 social studies, there are 4 math, there is personal finance, and 3 science courses available now for teachers that are teaching high school to genuinely know, what does this instruction need to contain and what does it look like? And this is just an example snapshot from the beginning of one of those course requirements. I will say that since the moment this has been approved, quite literally, in fact, I left the board meeting to go to a training. Quite literally, since that moment, I've been training across the state in regions and school districts, and this is something everybody's excited about. There's the excitement, of course, of graduation rate, but what they really wanted was somebody to say, what to teach? And then we've been working on how to design instruction. But the question I get now is, what can I use to do this well? What can I use to ensure that students get this instruction? And that's why I come to you today. I think it's really important that we recognize that students do need those materials. And so these are the big summary and takeaways, is that the aims, and again, I think that's actually more clear than special populations, and so I'd recommend we go with the alternate academic instructional materials, that the aims ensure that we are providing quality standards-based instruction. This is not a Google search. While there are some great websites that are publicly accessible for some things, that does not mean it's quality, right, and rigorous. And that districts now know what to purchase. We can't tell them, right? That's what you guys are for. So help us tell them what they can purchase, because they are ready, willing, and able to do so if we would just inform them. But most importantly, what my proposal does is it changes what has been our case, which is that all meant most, and it makes sure that it becomes all means all. For the very first time, each and every student will be part of our all in our schools if we go forward with this proposal today. So I am requesting that we begin with this first cycle for the 4 courses for high school of the alternate academic diploma English 1, alternate academic diploma English 2, alternate academic diploma English 3, and alternate academic diploma English 4, knowing that moving forward, we would continue to do so for math, science, and social studies as well as they come up in the natural cycle. Are there any questions?
Lots of them.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, in the standards that you, first of all, thank you for your work, because my daughter is a special needs teacher, and we've got a special needs grandson. So I understand that's a daunting task. Are there gonna be, and this is not necessarily with the standards or the textbooks, but are there gonna be limits under the guidelines that we've chosen as to the number? Like now, Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody has the same limit, right, Vicki, about, there's so many percentage of kids that you can have under an alternative diploma portfolio, but you can't exceed that no matter what. And for instance, in our case, we're a small district, and we had more than that one year and then way less than that one year. Do you know? Can you address that?
So that's
actually not
actually
related to textbook adoption, but I'm just wondering.
And it's a great question. It's actually a companion piece in ESSA. ESSA figured out a couple things. One, these students matter, and they haven't counted in our all because they kind of made a mistake on their end. Thank you for noticing that. But the other thing was how we calculate that percentage in participation. In past years, under No Child Left Behind and other elementary and secondary education acts, it was you could count in your state accountability reporting for your district a percentage based on your proficiency from your general ed assessment. That formula is gone. It is now a much simpler formula in that the statewide, needs to get to a 1% participation rate total of all students. Within each district, they may or may not exceed that 1% because these are individualized decisions made in an IEP, and there's some really good reasons. One of the examples I'll call out that's very clear. One of our districts is Tennessee School for the Blind. Those students often have far more complex needs than their visual impairment. It is inappropriate to limit them to 1%, right? We find the same thing in some of our smaller districts. We have some small districts where I know we have some incredible, either it's a family that's choosing to adopt or foster several students, or we have some situations where we've had a lot of students with comprehensive needs that need specific care, and they happen to be housed in a small district, so it's very disproportionate within the population. That's appropriate. There'll be a justification process where districts can say, we're over and we know we're following the criteria and we know our students are meeting the eligibility. This is how we know that. That's fine. We'll post it and that will be fine. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, if you had any input into that, I appreciate it.
I'm doing a lot of
That's
training
great.
on that on the other
Okay.
side.
And obviously, to proceed with caution down this path so that we do keep the rigor high for the students,
Correct.
especially at early grades. And I know you know that much, much better than I do. Just to state that.
No, I'm glad you said that because we're actually, this has been so well received. We're looking at creating middle school course requirements this year to help, again, raise what middle school does and then in the future move down to elementary so that we really start right and keep the path.
Okay, so then within the standards and within the proposal that y'all have, is there the ability to differentiate as a teacher between your students? Because just as you said, you know, you've got different standards all the way across the board. Every single one of them is different. So, you know, and I see, I'm on, I don't know which slide, it's 22?
Yes.
Okay, I see your standards there.
The course
So
requirements.
how will, as far as the textbook adoption, back to business here, will there be the ability to differentiate between your students in the standards that they have to evaluate in the adoption cycle?
Yeah, so when we look at the tool, which was also in your pocket in the back, and this is a proposed example screener, you will see that a lot of what we're talking about is that the curriculum is presented in a way that can be differentiated for students with a variety of learning and abilities. But I would like you to pull that out and look at yellow, the yellow section, because I think that will help you understand some of that differentiation.
Are you talking about?
It's in the pocket. No, it's in the back. It's a sample screener. So you're going to look for this document. It should be on that front pocket behind all of that
Right.
stuff.
This one.
Yes.
Thanks.
If you look at the
See,
yellow
I need special
section,
instructions as
and
well.
I'm going to give you visuals.
Yeah. Thank you.
So if
Got
you
it.
look at the yellow section,
Got it.
and if you look at number 3 and 4 on that very first page, you will see there's an asterisk. That asterisk goes up to like one at the bottom, but you also can look up top. And what we're talking about there is that it's important to note when providing instruction or assessing a student's writing skills, the student should be using their individualized tools, assistive technology, or physical accommodations as required. The physical act of using a pencil is not the goal, but the larger concept of written skills. And you'll see that kind of language throughout the entire screener as well as the course requirements. In fact, for the course requirements, most things that talk about reading say when read or heard. And that was an important piece for us, is that this is not about can you meet this specific level. This is, are you receiving instruction so that you are achieving? Because what we know is even if you have a cognitive disability, you can learn to read. You might not learn to read at your grade level, which is why it's important to have this curriculum, but you can learn to read. And you may be reading pictures, you may be reading symbols, you may be reading words, you may be reading a mix of those. You may be getting really good at reading us or sign, but you can read. And that's what this curriculum, if you get into this screener and start to really delve or you look at the course requirements, really does do for the teachers. The other thing the course requirements do is they embed a lot of the functional and life skills that we have often taught separate. We know that hasn't worked. We know that because our students leave and they're at home and they're collecting a check, and that's not a life, and it's not the life they want either. we know we need to embed it, and we need to embed it in a natural, generalized way, and you'll start to see that in the course requirements as you delve into them, which will be the yellow section in that screener. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. A daunting task. Golly. Okay. Thank you.
And I would like to add a comment. By adding this to the official adoption cycle, we create a demand for these materials from the publishers. And by creating a screening instrument, we hold them to the criteria that we set forth that these materials must meet. So there are large implications by adding this to the cycle.
And we do have a vendor already ready.
That was my next
She's waiting
question.
for today, and we have another one that we've already met with that is working on the component that requires the online posting. Can somewhat compromise their materials at this point, so they're working on a fix for that. And we have a couple other vendors that we've reached out to. So we do have, I know we have one that continues to inform me that they're ready, and I continue to tell them that I have to have today's meeting. So I know they're ready. But I will like to share with you this screening. Should you all approve this? Should this be something that you see as critical a need as I do? This screening instrument was provided as one example, and you'll see that we really tried to, again, mirror general education, because this is not reducing, this is ensuring that they receive what's different for them to have their rigorous instruction that they deserve. The first section, the non-negotiable, really talks about meeting these extensive, substantial, individualized requirements of students, but also, frankly, for the teacher to be able to not only have the student present, but truly participating and active. So that blue section really is how you do, like if you have those structures in place, then that has set the teacher up for that success. The yellow section in the screener is the course requirements for that course. You will see that the very first column is the standards, which are the general ed standards, so that you can see that they generally are aligned, but also how very different they are, that we really have taken into account this population of learner and their needs. And then when you go on, you will see a purple section, which is the high quality instruction. This is what high quality instruction looks like for students for whom we know have complex needs. They need a comprehensive plan for instruction. And so we've ensured that that's in place. And then finally, as Lauren mentioned, it's really important in K through 5 that we have the foundational literacy skills. It is equally important that those are accessible all the time to these students. And so they're in there. And while they do not get scored for whether or not they pass, this will really inform districts on how many of those foundational literacy skills they're going to have continued support in providing to their learners should they adopt that material. So it's really intended to inform the district, especially if they have a specific population with a specific need, such as we talk about TSD or TSB, they'll be able to really see if that meets that population. Any additional questions?
I was waiting for Lacey. We'll go to Joanna next for publisher presentations.
Hi, Joanna Collins. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education. And I wanted to take a few minutes to go over the role of the commission in reviewing publisher appeals. I want to set us up for procedural success today. As Dr. Kirk mentioned in her statements, she gave an overview of the role of the advisory panelists in the textbook review process. And under Textbook Commission Policy 2.100, the commission may give publishers an opportunity to respond to the findings of the state advisory panels for an allotted time not to exceed 15 minutes for each publisher. And so on your agendas, you'll see that you will be hearing from several publishers today, and we appreciate their time and coming to present their comments. Following the publisher's comments, you'll review all of the information that you have before you and determine next steps. So the information that you'll take into account will be the publisher's responses to the advisory panelist's findings, any specific evidence that they provide regarding alignment to the standards, the letter of appeal that is found in your binders, the screening instruments and the expectations reflected in those, as well as public comments and any other information that you've received from the advisory panel feedback. Any questions regarding your role? And so a couple of notes just regarding how we want to go about clearly recording in the meeting minutes and for those reviewing it via live stream. So after reviewing the comments and all of the information before you, you'll have several options for next steps. So the commission may determine that additional information is needed, either from the reviewers or the publisher. The commission may determine if they have all of the information that they need and they want to vote to either accept or reject the publisher's appeal at the current meeting by making a formal motion to either add the item to the approval list or deny the appeal. You may determine that approval or rejection of the appeal needs to be added to the next agenda, to the next meeting's agenda, because you don't have all of the information before you. And so really you're going to take into account all of the information that you have in your packets from the advisory panel, from the publisher, and determine whether you need anything else or whether you have all of the information that you need to make a decision today. And so in terms of making a motion, I take my Robert's Rules of Order with me everywhere I go. And as you know, our meetings are governed by textbook commission policy. And where textbook commission policy is silent, Robert's Rules of Order comes into play. And so we will need to, in order to make sure that we have a clear record, you will need to make a motion one way or another. So for instance, I motion that we add Title X to the adoption list to be voted on today. Or I motion to deny the publisher's request to add item X to the adoption list voted on today. And then when we get to the actual voting on the approval list, if you have added items to the list, you'll need to clearly note for the record that I motion that we approve the list as amended today with the addition of X titles, because the version of the list that is in your packets may be different from the version that you end up voting on, depending on the information presented today. Are there any questions? Okay, Lacey.
Okay, so with regard to the publisher's appeals that you're going to hear today, each publisher has written a letter outlining their appeal with their evidence. This is located in tab 9 of your binder. The publisher will reference reviewer comments made on the screening instruments as well as the feedback sheets. The feedback sheet is, I'll show you an example on the next slide, is a tool used to gather specific feedback from the publisher in response to the Section 1 reviewer comments that illustrated where content was missing, misleading, inaccurate, or not aligned to the standards for that course. Reviewers provided response feedback to the publishers on the same sheet with their final recommendations on alignment to the standards that were being addressed. So in the example, you can see that the publisher is outlining what the comments were made. And then in the yellow and the blue columns, you can see that this reviewer is stating that what their feedback is in regards to the content that's been changed by the publisher. And then in the blue column, the reviewer is stating, yes, I'm recommending that this standard now aligns. And so ultimately, they're changing their decision on their screening instrument. Both the publishers and the reviewers had the same goal of addressing areas of content weakness, and both strive to improve instructional materials. I can say after watching this process unfold, both the publishers and the reviewers did their best job in trying to address content areas that were not aligned to the standards on the initial review. Included in tab 9 are the appeal letters, the publisher evidence documents, if they presented any to me, and the feedback sheets with the reviewer's final recommendations.
I just wanted to make it clear in this tab, what I did was I had the publisher's letter, and then immediately after that, I have the feedback sheet, so you don't get confused. You just need to go to the next page so that they're all aligned to which publisher we're talking about.
I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the publisher's written responses.
So to be clear, did we have titles that made it through a second review?
Yes.
Yes.
And those are already included in the list for approval. They're not these that we're talking about today, is that correct?
That's correct. So there were 38 total titles that were re-reviewed. And of the 38 that were re-reviewed, 26 passed on the second review. Okay, moving on to the last item in the workshop, the public comments to section D. So we have a representative from Tennessee Textbook Advocates. Her submitted letter requesting to speak can be found in your binder in tab 10. According to policy, reviewers and commission members are to view all public comments prior to making their final recommendations on titles. Reviewers, publishers, and commission members were provided copies of the public comments that were submitted on or before the due date, and these are also located in tab 10 of your binder. So the very back. So all of the public comments that we received have been printed and provided to you guys, and they were also sent to the reviewers prior to the reviewers making their final Section 1 reviews. In reference to the public comments that official reviewers received prior to making their final recommendations on titles, one reviewer, who is currently on our panel, responded to those public reviews via email, and that is the email that's the very first item in your binder. So I wanted you to be able to have that as well, because this was from a reviewer. Are there any comments or questions about public comments?
Do we know if the publishers responded to the public comments in any regard?
Some of them did respond to public comments in their feedback sheets that were created. One of the tabs was for public comments, and several of the publishers did address public comments that were given to them.
Any further questions from the commission on anything from the workshop items this morning? If not, we will take a 10-minute break and resume at 11:35 to proceed with our official textbook commission meeting. State of Tennessee. I serve on the commission as the Commissioner of Education's designee, and I will be serving as chairman until we elect a chairman a bit later in the agenda. I do serve as the secretary of the commission. I will tell you that we are going to repeat many of the items we did in the introductory portion of the workshop because we are now live streamed and on the record for this meeting, and so all of those introductions and introductory remarks will be repeated. I would also remind those who are on the commission and others that when you begin to speak, you need to identify yourself. You must be recognized by the chair in order to speak, so please request permission from the chair. The chair will recognize you, and then you will be permitted to speak. We will open the meeting with roll call by Ms. Rachel Brew.
Dr. Vicki Kirk,
Present.
Neil Durbin,
Present.
Frank Cagle, Karen King, Kelsey Reese, Jack Parton,
Present.
Kay Kelsey,
Present.
Michelle Bowman.
Present.
Madam Secretary, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. And now we'll begin with introductions of staff, and then the commission will introduce themselves. In the audience today from the Department of Education, we have Dr. Elizabeth Alves. Dr. Alves is the Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Teaching and Learning. We have Lauren Bardwell, Executive Director of Adolescent Literacy, Social Studies, and Instructional Materials. We have Lacey Noel, Director of Content, and Rachel Brew here to my right is the Administrative Assistant for Teaching and Learning. She serves as our recording secretary. And also here on my left, we have Joanna Collins, who is Assistant General Counsel for Procurement. Allison Gauld will also be addressing the commission later in the meeting, and she serves in the Division of Special Populations. We thank all of those who have worked very diligently to prepare for the meeting, and we also want to thank each commission member for being here this morning. I'd ask you please to introduce yourselves just briefly, where you serve, and just a brief bit about yourself, and we'll start with Mr. Cagle.
I'm Frank Cagle. I'm a citizen representative from East Tennessee. I'm a retired newspaper man, and I live near Knoxville.
I'm Kay Kelsey, and I am a representative from West Tennessee, and I'm a retired Shelby County school teacher.
I'm Neil Durbin. I'm the Director of Schools at Dyersburg City Schools. I also teach AP Human Geography still. Been there for a long time, since 1982.
My name is Jackie Parton. I'm Director of Schools in Sevier County. I've been Director of Schools there for 31 years.
I'm Michelle Bowman. I'm an elementary school librarian in Sevier County.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to give an overview of the process and the purpose of the Textbook Commission, as I read in the workshop, but will share with you again for the meeting. I am the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the state of Tennessee, and I serve on the Textbook Commission as the Commissioner's representative. I'm from Greene County. I was reared there. I graduated from Greenville High School, worked at a local hospital and for the Greenville City Schools there. I have served as a teacher, an assistant principal, an assistant superintendent, and then most recently, before my coming to the department, I was the director of schools in Greene County, where I served for 5 years. I raised my family in Greenville, and I still live in the community where I volunteer and attend church. I hope that my family, my children will move back to the area. I would love for them to live near me and to be educated in the public school system there. I'm a proud Tennessean and a member of the Department of Education. The purpose of these remarks is to provide information for the Commission and our audience on the adoption, review, and revision of standards in the adoption process for textbooks. The state, which is made up of the colleagues that I just introduced to myself and many, many others, along with the State Board of Education, develops standards that detail what students should know and be able to do. To be clear, this work is the work of the Board of Education, and the Department of Education assists in that work. We hold ourselves accountable to these standards by summative testing at the end of each year. These standards reflect the knowledge and skills that we as a state believe our citizens should possess. All standards are officially adopted by the State Board of Education, and there is more transparency now than ever before in standards adoption, and that's a good thing. I will now talk about standards development and review. The social studies standards, particularly these are the last standards that were adopted, were developed by a group of Tennessee teachers and approved by the State Board of Education. The contents in the most recently approved social studies standards are not new, but have been reorganized. Some topics that were taught in one grade are now being taught in a different grade, while some content has been integrated throughout all grades. The teaching of world cultures and world religions is not new. In fact, these topics have been taught for more than 25 years. Standards are reviewed regularly. The Tennessee General Assembly, building on the governor's standards review process and in coordination with the State Board of Education, passed House Bill 1035 in 2015, which set out a remarkably transparent process of ongoing standards review and revision. Revised social studies standards were approved in July 2017 and will be implemented in the 2019-2020 school year. The review process involved Tennessee educators and non-educators reviewing both the standards and public comments collected through an open online process. The review process allows for a thoughtful and systematic approach to revisions that will impact all educators and students. Standards are a list of knowledge and skills. Curriculum and pacing of the standards is developed at the local level through the creation of a scope and sequence of the standards, materials used to teach the standards, and lessons and activities that move students to mastery of the standards. And now for the textbook adoption process. Textbook adoption begins with a review of books that publishers put forward for a particular adoption. The review starts with a group of Tennessee teachers and non-educators selected through an application process, reviewing the textbooks that are available for purchase in the subject areas that are up for adoption. Once reviewers are approved, they are trained in the content, and this is the standards, and the process. The review is a two-step process. Reviewers use a screening instrument to evaluate the textbooks. Books are first reviewed based on alignment to standards. If the book makes it through, it is then analyzed further on indicators of high-quality instruction. If the book does not make it through the first phase, publishers have an opportunity to make revisions and resubmit for a re-review by the reviewers who initially failed the material. Publishers are allowed to appeal the final recommendations of the titles that have failed the re-review of Section 1. The Textbook Commission has the authority to reject or approve the appeals set forth by the publisher, and we have some of those that will be taken up today. Once the books are approved through the vetting process by this team of teachers, they are submitted to the Textbook Commission for approval and then to the State Board for their approval. The approved list goes out to districts, at which point the law requires local districts to establish local review teams comprised of community members, including teachers, parents, and subject matter experts to review the books. They submit their selection to the local Board of Education for approval of the books for use in the district. All districts must adopt books, but adoption does not mean they must purchase. They may use books that were previously adopted and purchased, or they may create materials of their own. There is also a waiver process that allows districts to utilize locally vetted materials that are not on the state list. Waivers must be approved by the Commissioner of Education. It is also important to note that the process is very open, with all books that are up for current adoption available for review by the public. Members of the public may submit a formal comment regarding any textbook under review. All public reviews are sent to the publishers, reviewers, and commission before formal recommendations are made as per the process for public review policy. In summary, I would say that we have a very open process for both standards development and review and textbook adoption in Tennessee. The content experts that are reviewing and approving these documents at the state level are Tennessee educators and non-educators, and much of the decision-making resides at the local level with local educators, parents, and the public involved in the process. Now we're going to move to our consent items with a voice vote. I will take a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
Also move.
Mr. Cagle, motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Durbin. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Like sign. The agenda is adopted. I'll also take a motion for approval of our March 19, 2018 meeting minutes, which are found in tab 1 of your binder.
Also move.
Mr. Cagle.
Second.
Second, Mr. Parton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The minutes have been approved. The next item we will take up is election of a chairman. I would open the floor for nominations.
I nominate Neil Durbin.
Mr. Cagle nominates Neil Durbin. Do I have other nominations? Do I have a motion that the nominations cease?
So moved.
Mr. Parton moves the nominations cease. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Bowman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations are closed. Now we will vote by roll call vote to elect Mr. Durbin as chairman.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Madam Secretary, you have all yeses.
Mr. Durbin is elected as chairman of the commission, and I will turn the meeting agenda over to him at this time.
Our next action, do you want to amend? Our next action is to elect a vice chairman. Do I have nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Jack Parton.
Okay, nomination of Jack Parton by Mr. Cagle. Any other nominations? Do I have a motion that nominations should cease?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Bowman. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor to cease nominations? Say
Aye.
by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. Okay, voice vote, roll call voice vote.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have all yeses.
Thank you, Dr. Parton. Next, we will have a presentation on Special Populations Addition to Section E. Ms. Allison Gall, please recognize yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Allison Gall, Behavior and Low Incidence Disability Coordinator with the State of Tennessee and Department of Education.
Okay, you've been recognized.
Thank you. So thank you, members of the commission. I'm here to propose that we add alternate academic instructional materials to the textbook adoption cycle moving forward in response to our new alternate academic diploma policy, which requires the 22 credits as well as the requirements of the alternate assessment. So I am proposing that for this first cycle, we add the alternate academic diploma English Language Arts 1, 2, 3, and 4 courses to the cycle.
Are there any questions for Ms. Gall? If there are no questions, and I assume that's it, Ms. Gall?
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
then we'll accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
So this is, oh, sorry. I was going to, just to clarify, we do have this listed as one of the action items on later, under the roll call votes.
Oh, later, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dr. Parton, do you have a question?
I was getting ready to make a motion, but I see that it's further down the agenda.
Okay. Okay, at this time, we're going to have publisher presentations as to the appeals process. We've got 6 of those. We will limit the appeals to 10 minutes. That will be timed, and we will try to stick properly to that. Questions will follow that 10-minute time period. We'd ask you to come up, please recognize yourself, and then we will proceed. So we will begin with BE Publishing, please. And members of the commission, you will look, this is where we begin at tab 9 as we were looking through that workshop. So if you will, please recognize yourself.
Good morning, members of the commission. My name is Mike.
I'm sorry, could you push the button there so that it's, or move the microphone? I don't know which.
Is that better?
Much.
Okay.
Thank you. It's being strained. So.
Good morning, members of the commission. Thank you for hearing me speak this morning. My name is Michael Gesowich. I am president and founder of the publishing company BE Publishing. I flew from Rhode Island to be here. So I don't know if you get visitors from that little tiny state that you have to draw letters to with an arrow. It's so small. But thank you for hearing me. So I stand before you today as I'm a former CTE, career and technical education teacher of 17 years. And I began my company kind of coinciding with my teaching career. And why that's relevant to my, my being here today is that one of the most important skills that we can teach our students throughout the United States and across the world is communications. So we had a textbook for course number 5888, Business Communications, that was submitted for adoption. And I have a few comments to share with you on why I would like that book to be reconsidered for adoption in the state of Tennessee. Number one, round one, the textbook did fail, and we readdressed every single item that was noted by the two reviewers, as far as rewriting new content or revising or modifying. Upon submission of round two, we received a passing grade, if you will, a percentage of approximately 82%, which deemed it as adoptable. And then a second reviewer rejected it a second time. The percentages of standards that we met on round one and then to round two did increase, but there still was not quite enough by that reviewer. So my being involved in a number of adoptions in my 22-year history with my company has brought me in front of panels like yourself amongst many states across the United States. And I applaud your process and your diligence and the hard work and effort that goes into the adoption process here in Tennessee. It is far, far superior than a number of other states that I have seen, so I commend you for that. I would like to point out that there was a minimum number of standards that we did not meet. There were approximately, really it boils down to 4. Standards 11, 12, 13, 18, and 19, which is a total of 5, but we actually only need 4 in order for us to meet the 80%. And my biggest concern is that there were 2 reviewers, and I'm not sure if the reviewers are able to collaborate with each other upon discussion, but there's very contradictory type of comments from one reviewer to the next. For example, if you take a look, standard 12 was rejected by reviewer number 1. Reviewer number 2 gave it glowing recommendations and said that we did an excellent job of meeting the standard. And that kind of contradictory comments or facts kind of is why I'm here in front of you today, to ask you to reconsider either A, that the textbook be adopted based on as submitted, or B, have a third party re-review just those standards that had contradictory comments. I know from being a teacher, many things are perceived as subjective. And I get that. I'm not questioning the process. What I'm questioning is that, or asking is just so that we can have a diplomatic process for this particular textbook. It's one I'm very passionate about, and that's why I'm here in front of you today. And lastly, I just want to point out that the textbook that we did submit, Business and Professional Communications, has been adopted in a number of other states, including Texas, Florida, and several others. And it does meet all of the national business communication standards, and it's also been adopted by one of the largest certification companies in the world called Precision Exams. It meets 100% of their standards. And Precision Exams, if you're not familiar with them, are a leading certification company where, for not just business communications, but all walks of life as far as providing students as well as workplace professionals with a certificate that says they're competent in that area. And this textbook has met that as well. So those are reasons why I'm standing before you today. So that's it.
Thank you. Appreciate your straightforwardness and brevity. Are there any questions?
Chairman Durbin, I have a question. May I be recognized?
And Chair recognizes Dr. Kirk.
So you say that this is 100% aligned to the Precision Exam Certification for Business Communications 1 and 2. Correct. Who did that alignment? Who determined that alignment to
They have
those
an
standards?
independent panel that reviews the textbooks, and it's teachers who have taught in that content area.
Clarification for you, you had alluded to the fact you didn't know whether reviewers could collaborate. They are not allowed to collaborate.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Our next All right, our next presentation will be from Pearson. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Durbin. My name is Phil Hester. I'm a Tennessee sales manager for Pearson, a lifelong resident of the state of Tennessee, former public school teacher. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. In the social studies submission, we only submitted in grades 9 through 12 high school books. All of our books except one, the Pearson Economics book, was not passed by the Tennessee Review Panel. The last re-review they did, they had a couple of objectives. They said that we actually met, but they felt like that the depth of understanding and the depth of coverage might have been somewhat lacking. With me today is Ms. U.S. Sampson Lazoy from our Boston Editorial Division. She's our Senior Vice President in charge of all editorial development for humanities, social studies, and science. I'll turn it over to her and let her address our appeal comments, and we'll pass out some handouts to you that you can refer to as she's presenting.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay.
Recognize
We
myself.
will allow you to present. State your name, please.
Thank you.
And position.
My name is Louise Sampson Lazat. I'm the Vice President for Product Development of Humanities and Science at Pearson. And I
Okay,
can give you
you
my
are
spelling
recognized.
if you need it.
That was long.
All right, good morning, or almost good morning, Dr. Kirk and Chairman Durbin and the other ladies and gentlemen of the Textbook Commission. I'm here today regarding Pearson's appeal for our grades 11-12 Tennessee Economics program, which was submitted for course 3431. I'd like to start by thanking all of the teacher reviewers who spent all of their time reviewing our program and providing such very good feedback. I'd also like to thank the members of the department staff for helping us to navigate this process. And finally, thanks to you, the members of the commission, for the opportunity to speak with you here today. Our goal in this process is to provide the highest quality Tennessee-specific economics program for students and teachers. The program under consideration was based on the nation's market-leading program and is a revision of the economics program that is currently being used by 40% of Tennessee districts. This program includes custom content for Tennessee that was specifically designed to meet both the letter and the intent of the standards. We greatly appreciate the hard work of our teacher panels who considered our economics program for listing. However, we respectfully disagree with the evaluations of 3 of the reviewers who found insufficient depth of coverage for 5 standards and 3 social studies practices. So I'd like to direct your attention to the booklets that you should have in front of you, I hope. This contains the following supporting evidence in our appeal. So in the front are some stapled folded pages in the front of the booklet, and this contains the publisher-provided chart that addresses the specific standards and practices in question. And this document was also sent to you with our official appeal document, so it's probably also in your binder, but you have a separate copy of it. I don't know how big they printed it, and I know there's a lot of type on these pages. So using that document in each row as you move from left to right, you'll find first the standard, both the number and the full text of the standard. And then next you'll find the Pearson notes about the content that was addressed in the initial reviewer's comments. And then the reviewer's comments and response to our re-review process. And then finally, in the last column on the far right, you'll find our appeal comments, which appear in blue text. And these comments explain our understanding and interpretation of the standard and also provide additional context and examples of how we met each of these individual standards. Then on the second tab, if you go to the, pull the orange tab, you'll see the beginning of the correlation chart, which is from the teacher's edition for economics. And this is an updated correlation that reflects all of the places across the program where we meet each standard. And this includes any additional pages where we included enhanced content through the process earlier this year. And I just want to note that these revised correlation charts were also provided to our review panel members when we met with them back in August. And then finally, if you turn to the green tab on the handout, you'll see the student edition pages where we modified the content for the re-review process. And this was based on the careful evaluation of those initial reviewer comments and the input. So I'd like to mention that it occurred to us that when you look at each individual standard and practice, in each case, a majority or 3 of 4 of our panel members found that the Pearson content met the requirement for ensuring that all students could attain mastery for each standard. So for example, 3 of 4 reviewers passed us on standard E07 and the same for E37 and so on. However, as it's already been noted just before me, the Tennessee process does not allow the panel members to meet as a group to discuss and come to consensus on their review and their findings. Thus that we can find that one reviewer may disagree with the majority of their panel members, but because they don't find that a single standard can keep us or a publisher off the list and keep a title from being presented. So after careful evaluation of the standards and the content modifications that we've made and our appeal comments that we've provided to you, we believe and think you'll agree that our program does satisfy the requirements of 100% for the course, this Tennessee's State Standards of Social Studies. And we find that it does so at sufficient depth of coverage to teach this course to mastery during the time allotted for what is usually in Tennessee a 1-semester course. So we ask that a member of the commission put forward a motion to place Pearson's economic test on the list of adopted programs. And it's our understanding that there currently are not economics programs on the adopted list of textbooks, but I think that was a question that also came up earlier today. And I'd like to thank you for your consideration of our appeal. We greatly appreciate the time and the service that you all have given to ensure that Tennessee students and teachers have access to the highest quality materials. And of course, I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Chair recognizes Mr. Cagle.
Throughout these comments, there seems to be a lot of repetition about primary sources. Could you give us your viewpoint about quoting people talking about Adam Smith as opposed to the students reading Adam Smith?
Certainly.
Or Karl Marx?
Certainly. So for example, I think you're referring to standard E07, which is compare and contrast the theoretic principles of capitalism, socialism, and communism as expressed through theorists such as Adam Smith and Karl Marx. And so the reviewer made a comment that they felt like in order to successfully meet that standard, you had to teach that standard using primary sources from the theorists. In addition to pointing the reviewer to all the locations in the program where we did cover that content, we also revised content in the book during the revision process to explicitly identify Marx as the philosophical origin for the economic systems of the Soviet Union and China. And then we also provided students and directed them to where they can make that comparison in other places in the text to connect with Smith. So on re-review, as I said, one reviewer still had some concerns that they needed to have extensive sources from each theorist. Our understanding of that standard as it stands, E07, is that it doesn't explicitly require students to use a source to do that, and that as long as they're comparing and contrasting the theorists, that they're meeting the letter of the standard. There's extensive content in topic 2 of this program, which provides a great detail on the principles of capitalism and socialism and communism, and that it does allow students to compare and contrast the theories expressed by Karl Marx and by Adam Smith. Yes, and then in addition, there are specific assessments in the program, specifically on pages 63 and 65, that ask students to make those comparisons. So for example, for that standard, we find that we can meet the standard without an extensive primary source. There were additional queries about, are there sufficient other primary sources in the program? And in our appeal comments, we provided a whole list of other places where primary source documents are used in the economics program. And I would also call your attention to the fact that given that it's an economics course, Primary data is a very important skill set. Analyzing, understanding primary data is also very important in economics. And the definition of primary sources includes primary data when teaching an economics course. So when you take into whole the understanding of primary sources as narrative text, primary sources as data sets, we feel that we also met those other practices specifically about primary sources.
Is there a philosophical feeling that students would have trouble understanding the Wealth of Nations or the Communist Manifesto since they were written 200 years ago?
I find I would never want to prevent a student from challenging themselves to tackle a challenging text like that, and I think that Tennessee teachers can certainly help a student to tackle that. Those sources are absolutely available for free online, and that if a teacher should wish to go deeper into a primary source that they don't find embedded in our product, they could do that with their students. I would agree with you, they would probably need a great deal of support to tackle some of the complex terminology and concepts there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair recognizes Dr. Kirk.
I have a comment and then a question. So you alluded to the fact that we don't have any economics books on the list, and that is the truth. We had 2 that were submitted, but neither of them passed through, so we don't have. That shouldn't sway us, it's just for your information. I want to clarify your statement about 3 of 4 reviewers passing standards. So is this true for every standard? I need clarity there.
Yes, so for example, if you went back to our full reviews and looked at the full reviews and the reviewer comments, E07, we were passed by 3 of the 4 review panels. And then E37, the same thing. So as you look at each individual standard, we were passed by a majority of our reviewers for each individual standard, but because of the way Tennessee process is set up, if, for example, because we need a majority of the reviewers across the board saying 100%, we couldn't put the pieces together to get 100% on 3 total reviews. Do you see what I mean?
So for each of these standards
so for each of the
listed here
standards,
that were at question,
3
there
of
was
the-
one reviewer for each standard that found it not to be aligned.
Correct. But because that one, so for example, reviewer 42 found that we didn't meet standard E30. The other 3 reviewers found that we met standard E30, but because standard 42 said we didn't meet E30, that means we haven't passed by that reviewer, so that we weren't able to swing them to our side of 100% review.
Okay. I'm going to need some clarity later on, perhaps, when we discuss these. The department can bring some clarity to me on that because I'm still a little fuzzy there.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? You alluded to the orange tab or the green tab, I'm sorry. Can you turn to the green tab and give me it kind of guide me through what was changed in that?
I don't have that highlighted.
Because the green tab obviously guides us to 2 pages. I'm a little fuzzy, Dr. Kirk, on where the adjustment was made.
All right. Just give me a second, please. So once you go to the green tab, if you go to page 36, so here under the section on China, where we specifically we revised the content in the student edition to specifically and explicitly identify Marx as the philosophical origin for the economic system, both in here in China. Here's the content speaking in China. We also did that up above in the paragraphs up above regarding the Soviet Union. And we made those revisions to provide additional instructional materials so that students could understand that these economic systems were coming from the theories of Marx, and then they can use that content to make a comparison with the principles of Smith, which are expressed in a different place on the program in the book, another page. So on page 36, we modified the content in the first column of text in that last paragraph around the Soviet Union, explicitly saying Marxist, discussing the Marxist economic ideas, and again in the content around China, explicitly making the connection to Marx there. So once again, clarifying the content to make those comparisons easier for students and teachers.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much
for your time.
Thank you both. Okay, our next one is from Cengage. Please identify yourself. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Gasparic. I'm with National Geographic Learning, part of Cengage, and I'm the representative here in Tennessee.
Okay, Michael, you are recognized. Thank you.
Thank you for what your commission does for education in Tennessee and providing the quality materials for the students. And also thank you for giving us the opportunity to appeal the textbook review for our business management textbook. The textbook we are appealing falls under course code 5889, Business Management. During the first round of reviews, the first reviewer passed our textbook, Business Management by Burroughs, 14th edition, at meeting 100% of standards, 27 out of 27 standards. The second reviewer stated that we only met 74% of standards, so 20 out of 27. With CTE courses, only 2 reviewers are reviewing textbooks, so there really is no majority vote. It's one denies the book, then you have to go through the appeal process. Through the rebuttal process, we provided further examples for 3 of those missed standards for the second reviewer. Those standards that we provided, further examples were standards 7, 8, and 10. This appeal is addressing not only those 3 standards, but also the additional 4 standards where the first reviewer said that we did meet and the second reviewer said that we did not. The standards 9, 11, 20, and 22 were not included in that first rebuttal because the correlation did offer the best examples of where the standards are covered in the text. We did submit an executive summary to the board, to the committee, stating and giving more detailed examples of where the standards are found and where they are met within our textbook. To meet at least 80% of the core standards, which you need to pass the CTE title, only 2 of the 7 above standards that reviewer 2 said we missed needed to be met to get to that 80%. In the last adoption adoption for this course in 2012, this textbook had majority market share for the course that it was submitted and approved in. It's a well-trusted, widely used text for high school business management courses and loved for the wealth of extra features, research opportunities, and critical thinking exercises offered at the end of each chapter. Many of the standards where the second reviewer did not pass us asked students to go outside of the textbook and conduct further research. We feel this text does include the content and opportunities for practice that students need to master these Tennessee state standards and successfully complete the projects described above. As a company, we graciously ask the Commission to grant our appeal to offer Burroughs Business Management 14th edition as a state-approved resource for Business Management course 5889. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Dr. Kirk.
Did you make any revisions to the materials or just pointed out where you've thought it aligned.
Okay, yes, there were no revisions to the textbook. Our content experts did the alignment, the correlation on their own, and felt that it met 100%, just like the first reviewer. So we went a little bit more in depth in the appeal process to point to that second reviewer where to find those examples to be able to master those standards.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next appeal, EMC Publishing, please. Please recognize yourself.
Good morning. My name is Nathalie Gaillot. I am senior French editor at EMC Publishing. And
Thank you. You're recognized. Go.
Before I start, I have prepared copies of the material that was submitted to you online, as well as of the statement that I'm going to read. If you would like to follow along, we are happy to distribute those if you'd like. And you will find that statement on the left tab of your folder. So dear members of the Textbook Commission, good morning again. As I said, my name is Nathalie Gaillot, and I am the senior French editor at EMC Publishing. And before I joined EMC, I was a French teacher. I taught at the middle school, high school, and university level. I'm here today to appeal our French program Thé Branché Level 3. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to appeal and appear before you today. EMC works hard to provide schools with quality world language programs, and we aim to meet all the standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. And I would like to mention also that our levels 1 and 2, we submitted 3 levels, textbooks 1, 2, and 3. Our levels 1 and 2 passed the reviewers process. Level 3 is the one that is taken into consideration that we're appealing today. Also, it is also our case that we had 2 reviewers review our program, and one of them passed it 100%, and the other one found concerns with it. So, as you know, we submitted our level 3 French textbook program called Thé Branché to the Tennessee Department of Education, and at the time of submission, our second edition, which is a 2019 copyright, was not available. Our hope is to ask to substitute the former copyright with a newer one when your state allows for substitution in January. But in the meantime, we're discussing the 2014 copyright, and we hope to show you enough evidence to persuade you to adopt our textbook. Succeeding the review hearing on August 11th, the reviewer who identified concerns with our textbook referenced 2 distinct areas. 1, a concern with the explicit nature in which 3 particular standards are covered in our program. And 2, a concern with the culture being up to date. Let me address the first concern. The reviewer indicated that the language used in our narrative was not worded explicitly enough to fit the standard, especially in regards to the fact that new teachers may not know how to direct students to do the activity in a way that fits all criteria described in the 3 standards under review. And these are the standards in question. So standards 3.2, acquiring information and diverse perspectives. B, describe the current event article or broadcast in the target language and evaluate how it compares with the same event reported in the United States. 4.1, language comparisons. E, investigate cognates that can have the same or different meanings among languages and speculate about the evolution of language over time. And 4.2, language comparisons. D, predict language origins based on awareness of cognates and linguistic similarities. We acknowledge that the concerns of the reviewer are valid and have created additional narratives using the language explicitly so that new teachers will understand how the activity fits those standards. You have been provided with a copy of the new PDF pages. Regarding now the concern with the culture, there are two distinct criteria to consider. First, that there is a wide variety of authentic, up-to-date visual images of the target culture, and then that the cultural content be accurate and current. For both criteria, the reviewer had indicated prior to the review hearing 4 specific pages where content was obsolete due to the changes in the French administration and the culture since 2014. We updated the 2014 copyright to reflect the most current content on the 4 pages in question. We also provided you with the documentation of this new content. Regarding the first criteria, the fact that there be a wide variety of authentic, up-to-date visual images of the target culture, the reviewer, after the review hearing, indicated that, quote, accessing online sources is not equivalent to having authentic, up-to-date visual images, end quote. We understand that some visual images in the 2000 copyright may no longer have been up to date. It is for that reason that we made changes on the pages identified by the reviewer prior to the hearing. After the hearing and based upon the reviewer's latest comments, we identified additional pages where the visuals could be brought up to date, and we made those changes. We also would like to state that we do believe that in this day and age, students live in a world that is increasingly digital and fast-paced. Therefore, to provide activities in the textbook that ask students to access online sources is essential and necessary to ensure that students are exposed to up-to-date visuals in the target culture regardless of the copyright year of a textbook. Regarding the second criteria, that cultural content be accurate and current, the reviewer notes stated, quote, I agree that most of the cultural information in the 2014 edition is still relevant. The 2019 edition, which unfortunately cannot be used for review, will rectify the updates needed in the reviewer's comments, end quote. In this comment, the reviewer appears to be mostly pleased with our content, but suggests that it does not fully meet the criteria. We have reviewed the culture content and identified content that was obsolete on 3 pages. We have made changes on those pages to ensure that our 2014 edition does have accurate and current cultural content throughout the textbook. We believe that we have now made all necessary and voluntary changes to our 2014 edition of Thé Branché to ensure that it meets all the standards set out by the Tennessee Department of Education and that it is culturally up to date. Thé Branché is compliant with national ACFL standards and has been formally adopted in all states where world languages were recently up for review. With the requested changes made, we believe that it now also complies well with the Tennessee standards. We hope that you will agree with us. We hope that you will add our 2014 edition to the adoption list so that we are able to substitute it with our 2019 edition for next school year. If there are additional comments or concerns, we're happy to work with you to meet your satisfaction. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Cagle.
The things you updated in this version, will they appear in the 2019 edition?
Yes.
So you just essentially have what you have coming for 19, you took back and put in this edition?
So we have regarding the culture, yes, those have been, those contents have been made to the 2019 edition. Regarding the specific narratives, those will be added to meet your satisfaction.
So the reviewers, were they or were they not able to see those changes?
I am referring, well, I'm referring to changes that were just made now and provided to you.
So they,
So, yes.
So-
Before then, we had reviewed 4 pages that the reviewer had specifically pointed out. There were no other pages that were specifically pointed out. So I actually personally went through the entire textbook to determine if there was anything that was obsolete in order to, and any changes that we could make to make the textbook completely current, in spite of its copyright dates.
Are there any other questions? Merci beaucoup.
Je vous en prie.
Je parle un peu le français d'Afrique.
Ah, d'accord.
J'habite là-bas avec le corps de la paix.
Alors, j'aurais dû faire ça avant.
Oh, don't even
le corps de la
try
paix.
it.
Le corps de la paix. J'ai entendu le corps de la paix.
We get the cultural differences here. I speak African French, and it's really poor.
That is wonderful. Stop boring to me.
Okay, our next speaker is from Studies Weekly.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Mogilevsky. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Studies Weekly.
Thank you. You are recognized.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I just wanted to say that Ms. Lacey Noel and Lauren Bardwell did an excellent job, and we feel very supported. Right now, you should be receiving a folder, and I'll be going through those contents. A little bit about my background. I am a 15-year veteran teacher. I taught elementary school, and I got my national board certification, and I am very much about reaching every single student. And so our publication, it's very important that we provide materials for Tennessee's teachers and students, and that it's accessible to all students. And one of the ways that we can make it accessible to all students, besides differentiation ideas and suggestions, is to make it the absolute perfect product for your teachers and students. So if you open up your folder, and on the left-hand side, you'll see our letter. And we're officially appealing and requesting that Studies Weekly's Tennessee Geography, Economics, and Early History, Tennessee 3rd grade student edition, 0319 be considered for passing the textbook review process. All of the reviewers gave wonderful, actionable feedback, which we really appreciated. And every single one, we were grateful for the opportunity to address and correct. We specifically rewrote, revised, added information and primary sources and activities to address all comments, not just the reviewers who had said no. We felt that every reviewer's comment was valuable and deserved action, as they are all vetted experts. They know Tennessee students better than any publisher ever will. So on the front page, we give some helpful hints on how to review our items. You have the username and password, and then every single URL. If you turn the page, page number 2 starts your executive summary. And we have our reviewer and response. I bold-faced the evidence to make it easy for you all to spot it, because we want you to take our word for it, but we also know that you need to have that evidence, so you'll see it bold-faced in there. You'll have the location of where you can find it, and then below it you'll see fully covered. That's additional evidence to help you make the decision that we do fully cover Tennessee standards. If you turn to the last few pages, you'll see the yellow and blue spreadsheets. I know it's super tiny, but we addressed every single one of those comments. On the right-hand side of your folder, you'll see 2 pieces of paper. The first one right here are directions on how you can see our edits, the before and after versions, because it's online. Because of our very flexible format, We were able to change every single thing that was requested to be changed. So online, you can download those PDFs. If it was red, it showed the before image, and then afterwards it's green to make it extremely easy to see the evidence that we've posted. Also on that page, it gives you instructions to access the digital versions of all the documents as well. The last page is our diversity board. We had our diversity board members go through this to make sure that it meets the needs of all of Tennessee's students. And you can read a little bit more about each one of those members if you'd like. In conclusion, we humbly request that you allow Studies Weekly's third grade Tennessee publication to be passed and accepted. Our publication has been vetted by the Tennessee Textbook Review Committee, and we've made corrections and adjustments to ensure our publication meets your stringent requirements. We want it to be the perfect thing for your students. So it is not a textbook that is used in any other state. It is specifically made for Tennessee. We didn't just take a second or third grade textbook and slap a picture of your state on it. It was developed and created from the ground up for Tennessee. Our product is 100% print consumable and online, and within the regulations set forth by the Department of Education, we can easily make changes if needed. I thank you in advance for your consideration and for the opportunity to improve our offering.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Cagle?
Do you know where Graceland is?
I'm sorry?
Do you know where Graceland is?
Do you know where
Graceland, okay,
Graceland
yes,
is?
yes, I do.
It was one of the corrections. It's not in Nashville.
Yes, that is correct, sir.
But what's more concerning is it was replaced with a picture of the state capitol, and capitol is misspelled in the caption.
Okay, I'm
The
not
building
aware
is
of that.
OL, the city is AL.
Right, you're absolutely correct. Let me see if I can find that. We're referring to the city? Yes, we were referring to the city as the capital, not the
But you have a
building.
picture of the capitol building,
Right.
and you're identifying it in the caption.
Right, as the capital
Yeah,
of,
OL.
of Tennessee.
It's not AL, it's OL. Okay?
Yes.
Any other questions? So just to clarify, the changes were made. It's online.
Yes.
Okay, the reviewers had an opportunity to look at the changes,
Yes.
and they still had issues with the changes.
Right. There were very few reviewers who had issues with it. It was, if you look through here, you'll see a pattern. There's a reviewer who had really, really stringent criteria to meet, and we wanted to please that reviewer.
Unfortunately, these are very small, and I'm very old
I'm sorry.
to read those.
In each page, starting with page 2, all the way through page 15, you'll see that we addressed every single one. So I know that the spreadsheet is really, really small, but we did address it here, and you did receive an electronic copy, correct?
Yeah.
So you could click on all of these and find the information, and the before and afters as well. It's verbatim what's on there.
Right, and I do appreciate the actual
I do
printed
have a
copies
question.
of that. Yes, Ms. Kelsey. Chair recognizes Ms. Kelsey.
How many people reviewed it the first time? And possibly you've said that, and I missed it.
I didn't say it, you didn't miss anything. I believe there were 5 reviewers.
Were you passed by any of the 5, 100%?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then with your corrections, you have been approved by all, or?
We still had a couple reviewers who didn't like the revisions. They needed more. So if you look on your first sheet, of the spreadsheet, you'll see And I know it's hard to see, so follow with me. If you look on line 3, and this is standard 3.09, identify and locate the 50 states of the U.S. Reviewer number 71 put an N. And so we address that at the very end. Our revisions and our response are in turquoise.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Kirk.
did you have other submissions that did pass?
Yes, ma'am. Our past publications include Kinder, First, Second, Fourth, and Fifth.
Are they in the same format as this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last publisher, McGraw-Hill. Identify yourself, please.
I am Dr. Darrell Fox. I am Senior Director for 612 Social Studies at McGraw-Hill Education.
Thank you. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to all of you. We really do appreciate all the work the Tennessee Department of Education has done. Lacey's done an amazing job. The work of the review panelists, and of course the work of you yourselves on the commission, all the work you put in to make this adoption happen. I'm pleased to say we are appealing only one title, McGraw-Hill Education's Grade 7 Social Studies program, World History and Geography, the Middle Ages to the 1700s. This program was custom built for use in Tennessee and for the World History course 0712. We've submitted a detailed document, which you should have in your binder, that outlines our appeal in detail. And what I want to do now is just simply summarize why we are asking you to reconsider the review panel's decision. Grade 7's failure to pass the review panel was very close. Overall, the vote was 3-2, but when we look at the actual review reports, it was much closer than even 3-2 indicates. The first thing I'd like to note is that when you go through the reviews line by line, there is no line item where our grade 7 program was failed by a majority of reviewers. When we look at the reports on how we covered the standards, except for just 2 standards, the reviews are 5-0 in our favor. All of the reviewers agreed that our grade 7 program met every standard except for 2, and for those 2 standards where there wasn't agreement, the vote was still 4-1 in favor of our program. 4 reviewers agreed we met the standard, and just 1 reviewer disagreed. Now, in addition to the standards, 2 reviewers did not recommend the grade 7 program because they felt it had extraneous content, content outside the scope of the standards. But a majority of reviewers, this time 3 out of 5, did not think we had extraneous content. And in fact, for 1 reviewer who felt we met all the standards, this was their only issue for not recommending the program, was the extraneous content. I want to stress that we don't believe our program has extraneous content that is outside the scope of the standards. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Finally, there was one other concern that prevented a reviewer from recommending our program. The reviewer felt that the book's chapters should go in the same order as the standards. We explain why we put our chapters in the order we did on pages 6 to 8 of our appeal letter. But I want to stress that we can't locate, we're never made aware of any state requirement that a program has to go in standards order in order to be recommended for adoption. And again, as with the other issues, there was only 1 reviewer out of 5 who thought the order of the chapters meant that they could not recommend the program. Okay, so those are the 4 issues that kept the program from being recommended. What I'd like to do is dig in a little bit, first on the issue of extraneous content, and then on the 2 standards where a reviewer didn't pass the program. Our detailed presentation about the extraneous content can be found on pages 2 to 6 of our appeal, but here's sort of the major points we're trying to make. The program was custom-made for Tennessee. We deliberately structured the book to match the Tennessee standards. The chapters were deliberately aligned to cover the topics and the time period of the grade 7 standards. We don't have whole chapters on topics outside the scope of the standards. We do not include events that happen long before or long after the scope of the standards. So of course, if that's true, why did 2 of the 5 reviewers decide we had extraneous content? It comes down to different opinions about what is needed to teach the course as outlined in the standards. The standards are the skeleton, of course, that we have to sort of flesh out the actual story of the events. So, for example, we decided we needed to cover the fall of Rome in order to explain the rise of the Byzantine Empire and to explain why it was the way it was. 3 reviewers agreed with us on this. 2 thought the material on the fall of Rome was extraneous. Similar arguments were made for other content. We have a little bit of material on Korean history because the Tennessee standards ask that we cover Japan and China. The team working on the book concluded that you couldn't teach certain parts of Chinese and Japanese history without discussing a little bit of Korea's history too. And so that's why we included that content. So that's the argument, in essence, that we're making in the appeal on this. All of our material we included is needed to effectively teach the content outlined in the standards and the course description. We know different people will disagree, and that different teachers use different material, different approaches, or stress different content. The reviewers themselves didn't even agree with each other. 3 didn't think we had extraneous content, but 2 of them did. So we would ask the Commission to consider that the choices we made were based on a good faith effort to present content that students need to be successful in the Tennessee curriculum, and to reconsider the findings of 2 of the 5 reviewers that the content is so outside the scope of the standards that the program should be rejected. So finally, let me focus on the 2 standards that reviewers felt we did not meet sufficiently. And please note, the reviewers all agreed that we had some content on all of the standards. No one thinks we were missing them entirely. The issue came down to whether the program had enough content to meet the standards. One reviewer concluded that we did not have enough content on standard 7.39. That's the significance of the rise of Portugal and Spain. And even after we added more content following the reviewer's initial review, the reviewers still did not think we had added enough. The other 4 reviewers thought we met the standard. Our detailed explanation of this is available on pages 8 through 11 in the appeal letter. We show the new content we added. We identify some of the additional content that was already in the program and which the reviewer may have overlooked. Similarly, a different reviewer concluded we missed standard 7.59. Our detailed discussion of this issue is on pages 11 to 14 of our appeal. This standard has to do with the age of exploration. It mentions the name of 8 explorers that the program has to cover. We have all 8 explorers in the program. And again, 4 out of 5 reviewers thought we met this standard, but 1 reviewer felt that we did not have enough content on one of those 8 explorers. And on this one, it gets a little more complicated because apparently we misunderstood what the reviewer was asking for. Their original review seemed to be asking that we include a map showing the explorers' routes and label them by their name and country. And we already had that map. It was at the beginning of the chapter, and we thought the reviewer had overlooked it, so we pointed them towards the map. In the re-review, the reviewer stated that the map was not what was needed and that the specific content about the explorer was missing. Had we understood the concern, we might well have added more content. We would still be willing to do that now if the Commission is willing to entertain that. But we think we already have the core content that is necessary to understand that explorer, it's Henry Hudson, to understand that explorer's major contributions to world history. So with respect to our alignment with these 2 standards, we're asking the Commission to consider that 4 out of 5 of the reviewers concluded that we met those standards, and that this indicates that our content on these standards is sufficient and does not constitute a reason for the program not to be recommended. And that concludes my remarks. As I said, we're very close to being recommended on this program. There's only 3 line items. Every one is a yes vote from a majority of reviewers. Our grade 6 and our grade 8 programs, and particularly grade 6, which is the first half of world history, have both been recommended, and we feel it would be really unfortunate if a program this close to being recommended was not listed and there was not a complete grade 6-8 series available from a major publisher for Tennessee schools. So thank you for the time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? If there are no questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we've got a time for public comment, and we've got a speaker for textbook advocates. Ms. Jackie. You have 10 minutes. Please recognize yourself.
Is this on? Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Archer, and I'm the co-founder of Tennessee Textbook Advocates.
Thank you. You are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to address you. I came here this morning with my colleague, Mrs. Hannaberry. We were here in Nashville 5 years ago before a completely different commission. Everybody was different. We were given a warm welcome, but in the end, our work, which was quite extensive and I thought pretty impressive, was ignored. We had almost 100 volunteers across the state that read the textbooks and reported factual errors, omissions, half-truths, and biases. In just one procedure, one vote, that work was ignored by 3 of only 5 members present for the final vote on adopting all of the books lumped together. 2 members voted no, 3 voted yes. So that meant that just one vote, one person was responsible for putting flawed material into every classroom in Tennessee, prejudicing every child for the next 5 to 6 years. We have worked very hard in those intervening years to persuade academia in Tennessee to hear us. Policies were put in place to accommodate online access for us and then to file our reviews with the department. They assure us that our reviews have been sent to the appropriate people, but we don't really have any assurance that they have been read by anyone because we get no feedback. 5 years ago, we were allowed to address the commission at almost every meeting. Whether our reports were read or not, we knew our comments were heard. But this isn't about our grievances, it's about your responsibility, which is very grave. Your responsibility is to put only honest, truthful, wisdom-building material in front of our children. In case you haven't noticed, young people have become less informed about their heritage and more influenced by radical anti-American, anti-Constitution ideology, progressivism or socialism. It's antithetical to our exceptional system of government by the people, a system that was well dissected, debated, and decided by our brilliant founders. They anticipated every pitfall and they set up firewalls. Those firewalls built into our miraculous Constitution are being ignored. They are not covered in these books. There's no Constitution in the books. There's no explanation of the enumeration of powers and the limitations that they set on the federal government. There's no explanation of the 10th Amendment and why it is so important. I've lost my place here. I've actually lost my second page. But I was going to go into Mrs. Henneberry's comments since I had a little extra time. American exceptionalism is downplayed or missing altogether. Traditional American values are disparaged. Capitalism is demonized. Government is hailed as the answer to everything, which makes students less self-reliant. High taxes and big government, the only way to go. An overemphasis on dividing Americans into groups, cultivating collective group thinking and pitting Americans against Americans. An overemphasis on rights and social welfare, free stuff. Thank you, Claudia. And cultivating animosity amongst students, whether warranted or not. Democrats are cast as the party of civil rights when Republicans have been responsible for abolition of slavery, passage of civil rights acts, and women's rights. Democratic Party predominantly is represented as the party of all minorities. The minorities are constantly represented as poor, urban dwellers. How must that affect minority students? Republicans are cast as the party of the white, the wealthy, etc., when in fact the wealthiest Americans tend to be Democrats. Democrats are predominantly cast as the party with fewer scandals. Criminal activity and scandals on the Democrat side are consistently omitted. Republican scandals are consistently exaggerated. Issues such as climate change are presented to students as undisputed fact when it is unsettled science. Websites suggested to students for research or activities are touted as nonpartisan when they are actually left-leaning sites. The standards are not the problem. It's the way they are covered and the additional material that may be included for ideological influences. There are 175 factual errors in just 12 of the books that we reviewed. America is persistently misidentified as a democracy. White is needlessly used to identify Americans wherever a negative light is insinuated. Diversity is promoted as a virtuous cure-all to all perceived social ills, whereas the advantages of assimilation are not even discussed. With every election, more young people are supporting socialist candidates. This does not bode well for the future of our constitutional republic, a system that has given us all every freedom we could ever dream of and guaranteed those freedoms to all minorities, to everyone.
Ms. Archer, I'm sorry. Would you please refrain to the comments on the text?
If we do not, I'm on my last line.
Go.
If we do not reform this curriculum and teach our children of their true history and heritage and how to preserve it, we will lose our amazing constitutional republic. Yes, your responsibility is very grave. Thank you very much for listening.
Do we have any questions?
We have supplied you with a sampling of the errors that we found in the textbooks. Ms. Henneberry has given you her sample. It's the second group that are just from the government and civics books because we found that most egregious. It's government and civics that seems to be neglected in teaching the true tenets of our constitutional republic.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll continue the meeting with the discussion of the publishers' presentations. I suggest that we take those one at a time and give people time for comment on those. Yes, Dr. Kirk?
May I ask, I have a series of questions for the department based on all of the publishers' presentations.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So if we don't have the answers, we will find them. So first of all, in order to pass, the title must pass 100% of the standards, correct? For social studies.
For social studies.
Does that mean that every reviewer passes 100% of the standards? Or a majority of the reviewers pass 100% of the standards?
Majority of the reviewers who reviewed that title must pass 100% of the standards.
Okay. Is there any way to resolve the issue when there are only 2 reviewers? There's no, the law does not provide for a consensus or consultation, and there's no oversight of the department to do anything there.
Correct.
Do you want me to read directly from the advisory panelist statute?
Yes.
Just for informational purposes? Okay. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll read sections. So this is Tennessee Code annotated 49-6-2201. And section 3 I'm looking at. So the advisory panelists shall individually make their recommendations and shall not be convened except upon the call of the chair of the commission. And then it goes on to say under number 7, or under number 5, each textbook or instructional materials proposed for approval shall be reviewed by multiple members of the panel. Under number 7, the commission shall evaluate all reviews submitted by the members of the advisory panel for each textbook or any instructional materials proposed for approval. The commission shall also review the public comments posted on the department's website pursuant to section 49-6-2203D4. If the reviews by the members of the advisory panel for a specific textbook or instructional materials do not lead to a clear recommendation as to the approval or rejection of the textbook or instructional materials, or if the commission finds that the public comments indicate that further review of a textbook or any instructional materials is called for, then the commission shall conduct a public hearing as to whether the textbook or instructional materials shall be approved.
Thank you.
I'm happy to go on, but I thought that might be helpful context.
So to, Dr. Kirk, to expound on your comment, so, you know, a clear decision with 2 people is sometimes very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's my understanding, then, Joanna, we could actually have the 2 of them collaborate if it was under my direction. So if
I believe
one
that's what it
totally
reads.
agreed with
Read that
it and
section
one
again.
totally, not totally, but if there was a disagreement between 2 reviewers, we could call them together to collaborate on their disagreement.
Right, so at the call of the chair of the commission, you may convene, and I would say that how that takes place could be, whether that's via email or whether that's, if
In
you
person.
request additional information via email, or if you actually convene the panel.
Right, because we can't, we have no way of identifying which particular reviewers we're talking about.
Right.
I assume you could.
Right, so
Okay.
the reviews are posted on our website without the advisory panelist information.
And in some of these cases, some of these are just a very minute amount of discrepancies that could be discussed
Yes.
via email or
That
phone
was
call.
what I was questioning in my
Right.
mind when I had that question. So, for example, you have 5 reviewers. 3 of them pass it 100%, 2 of them don't. That one passes. But if
That's
but if
correct.
2 of them pass it 100% and this one passes it 95% and the other 2 don't, then that one does not pass.
Correct.
Okay. On a re-review, do all the re-reviewers have to pass the text for it to pass?
No. So only the panelists who failed the initial review are asked to re-review. And so let's say if there were 5 members, 5 reviewers who reviewed initially and 3 failed, then, and 2 passed, only 1 of the 3 that are re-reviewing needs to pass. Because
Okay.
then now they have
Then
majority.
now they have a majority. Okay.
But they have to be the ones who, so they're directly addressing the issues. It's their personal issue that is being addressed.
That's correct.
Yes.
I think we all probably have the same problem. If you get down to 2 reviewers, one person can decide that this textbook will not be used in the state of Tennessee. I don't think we want to be there.
Yeah, I think that's where both of us were on that. Other discussion?
I'm wondering about next steps for these
Right.
appeals, and wondering if there's something we should ask to have done between now and the next time we meet, in terms of what you were talking about there. I don't know if there are any that the commission would today say they didn't think should pass. Maybe we should go through them and see if there's anybody that wants to make a motion that some of these should not be included, or if we want to wait until next time and get some information from the department on the specifics, some very simple information. This is what happened with this title. There were 2 reviewers and they disagreed. There were 3 reviewers that did not pass it, but none of them agreed on why they didn't pass it and those kinds of things.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Were any of the reviews that were done unanimous in disagreeing that, or agreeing that the recommendations or the questions that they raised were not answered? In other words, there were 2 reviewers that reviewed every appeal. Did any of those have both reviewers say, no, they did not meet it? I heard numerous people say, one did, one did not.
I would have to check specifically for those titles and the reviewers to see what happened, but I did check all of the appeal letters and double-checked the publishers in that they were saying if this reviewer said this and this reviewer said this, and they were all accurate in what
Okay, so you were checking that as they were actually speaking?
Yes.
Because I know that was brought up a couple of times, more than a couple of times. Yes, Dr. Kirk?
I wonder if you could direct us, not today, but maybe in the coming week, about the kind of information you'd like to have, some kind of a table that shows this, and then could direct, and I don't know if this would require a motion, if the rest of the commission would want something like this, but then you could direct the department to provide that information to the commission between now and the next time we meet, so we would have time to review that and consider it before we come back with a final decision.
And so, Mr. Cagle, do you want to comment on Dr. Kirk's statement?
I think that's a good solution. I guess the further question would be, do we need to request legislation that would allow the department to interview, if you're down to, of course, the root cause of all this is not having enough reviewers. But in the event that we have 2 people who have a difference of opinion, then I think we ought to be able to have the department sit down and resolve that issue. But if that may require, maybe the department could take that to the administration, whoever that turns out to be.
So thinking about the process, Dr. Kirk, that you were mentioning, that would be limited exclusively if you were to come up with a matrix for us of the topics, exclusively the topic that's disagreed upon and nothing else, and only if they were in dispute over their opinions of why, so that, but, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can't collaborate, right? Can they collaborate? They can collaborate upon our recommendation, my recommendation, which would be our recommendation.
Right, so for instance, you could convene them at the next textbook commission meeting. So if you feel as though you have enough information on any of the presentations on any of the items appealed today, you can make a motion and make a vote on that. If you need more information, the list that is before you today is on first reading, so there would be an opportunity to gather more information and then revise the list if the commission so desires. Prior to final reading, we would make sure that in order for all of this to be public and transparent, that any additional information would be presented at the next commission meeting as well, so that it could be included on the live stream that's on the department's website.
All right, so just for clarity on my part, because I'm slow. So they could review, they wouldn't have to come here to review. They could review and have a recommendation between the two of them if that's what we guided them to do.
They being the advisory panelists?
Yeah, the reviewers, the ones who did the appeals review.
Yes, so he is speaking about the reviewers, Joanna.
Yes.
He's requesting, can they be reconvened outside of this room? Like, can they do it before they get here?
That is exactly what I'm asking.
Okay. Please hold while I review.
Okay.
You can continue.
I think we would want to avoid bringing the reviewers in here in a public setting.
Exactly.
They have enough problems without
And other things to do.
people getting their phone numbers.
Yes. No, I agree with you. That's why I was trying to keep them insulated, if such. Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So I do know that any item that will require, under Open Meetings Act, so anytime one or more commission members is discussing an item that would go before the commission for a vote, that would need to be done in an open meetings forum. So whether or not I think one question is whether the chair could request additional information from the advisory panelists that the department would gather, and then we could present before the commission at the next commission meeting. Yes, sorry, I realized that head nodding is not, is
Yes.
not audio.
All right, so I think our next steps would be to actually open the floor for discussion about each one individually. If there's any other discussion prior to that, we can just assume we could go back in order of where we were. We good? Okay, and we can make a decision as to each one. Okay, would we need to? Would we need to?
If you need additional information on all items discussed today during the publisher hearings, you can vote on the list as is on first reading today, and I don't believe that a motion would be needed if you're not changing the list that's before you today.
Mr. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, that's what we did last year with science. We had some appeals. We passed the list on first reading, and then came back with some further information at the next reading and added a title, I think one title, on second reading to the list, and it was included.
So what we did was we passed the approved list, and then we came back and added one to it. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Do we need to do this first? Okay. All right, because we just discussed these, we'll go to these individually before we do the approved list. A motion on that, is that okay?
Right, and for clarity of the record, if you want to put it to the commission to make a motion that for further discussion of these items at the next meeting, that might be appropriate, just to make sure that it's clear in the record.
Should we do that individually? Because we may have some that we just approve in-house that we just kick out, and then we may have some that we want to have discussed it for the commission.
Sure, so you can put it for discussion as individual items.
Okay. So what we'll do, we'll talk about each one of these individually, and we can either approve, or we can agree that we would not approve, or we can ask for additional items to move forward on each one of those individually with a motion and a vote, correct? Okay. I hope that's clear to everybody. Sorry. All right. The first one, BE Publishing. Discussion.
For me, the problem with this one is that there were only 2 reviewers and they didn't agree. And so that's something I'd like to have resolved before I made a decision.
And so with that, then your suggestion would be, Dr. Kirk, as we just said?
Yes, to have the department speak with the reviewers and see if there could be some resolution before we make a final decision.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I make a motion that we have BE Publishing, the appeals studied by the department and the reviewers for action at the next meeting.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Cagle.
Second.
Second.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes. Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Thank you. Department, we good with that? Okay. The Pearson appeal. Discussion. Dr. Kirk.
The clarity I would need here is that, and I asked for clarity from the presenter on this, that 3 of the 4 reviewers passed each standard, and so I'm not clear on how that was not a majority. I don't know if that's something that's a simple thing that can be answered, or if we need to further study that.
So with this one, the publisher is looking at the individual standards being passed, but this economics book falls under social studies, so 100% of standards had to be passed. And so there were reviewers who marked no on their screening instrument, which ultimately caused the book to fail because they didn't have majority of the total reviewers to be able to pass. So they had 4 total reviewers, so they needed 3 reviewers to pass the product overall. So each reviewer may have only marked no for 1 standard, but because they marked no and it was 100% alignment, the book failed.
I'd like to see a little bit more on that. I'm, again, a little fuzzy. I think that would benefit from some clarity over time that could be sent to the textbook commission ahead of the next meeting so we have time to digest it and then discuss it at the next meeting.
So that would be a totally different ask in that we're asking for the clarity on the review. Okay.
Yes.
And which is interesting because I think that the issue with some of the reviewers was the clarity of where to find the content, in respect to where it was. See, so this is, okay, maybe it's not funny to y'all. It was to me. Okay. Motion? Dr. Kirk?
I will make a motion that we ask the department to provide a matrix that shows exactly what happened here, who passed what, so that we have clarity on why this this title did not pass.
We've got a motion.
I second.
Second. Ms. Kelsey? Vote?
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Thank you. Let's engage the review. Discussion on this.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Kirk?
again, 2 reviewers, and so my question would be the same as BE Publishing.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there were explanations, not revisions necessarily on this, but the
That's correct.
explanation would,
Between the 2 reviewers, one passed it 100% and one had problems with 7 standards.
right. Okay. So we're back to our first recommendation with this adoption. Further discussion? Motion?
I make a motion that item C be carried over to the next meeting, and we'll have clarity from the department on what to do about 2.
So we have a motion from Mr. Cagle. Second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Bowman?
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay. I assume that y'all are shaking your heads too, so everything's clear, I hope. Okay, thank you. All right, EMC Publishing, discussion. Mr. Cagle, sorry.
I seem to be confused here. We're talking about approving a textbook which is going to be redone in 2019, and which will answer the questions that were raised about it. I don't understand why we would approve an old version when the next version is going to be out in 6 months.
Dr. Kirk?
This happens occasionally, that a publisher is in the process of revising, but they don't meet the deadline to submit. And so that was my concern as well, Mr. Cagle. If we adopt this book and districts purchase it, they would be using a 2014 edition until 2024 because of the time frame. The publisher could substitute the 2019, but that would mean a repurchase for districts. So that's a legitimate concern, and it just has to do with the timeline of where this fell for the publisher. I do have a question. Their level 1 and level 2 books passed. Were those also 2014 editions? Just curious. I couldn't figure it out from, you don't have to answer today, but I'd like to know the answer to that.
Okay, and so in essence, even if it was substituted, we'd be taking that on blind faith. I mean, fair enough. We don't have a
Plus, some
submission
system may
that's
have already bought this one before that one comes out.
correct.
And they would have to submit this for substitution, and it would have to be approved as a substitution before it could even be considered for purchase.
Okay. Yes, please.
Hi, Rachel Brew. In tab 2, there's actually an explanation about substitutes if you wanted to go over that, since I know some people are new and they haven't discussed it. It's towards the back of all of the policy updates.
Yes, please. I am interested in that. I'm trying to get to it.
I have the substitution rule in front of me, so it's Rule 0520-05-01-.07. So at the first regular meeting of each calendar year, the commission will consider the substitution of the revised edition of a textbook for the edition previously listed and the substitution of a textbook that contains content revisions made since the previous official listing of the book. And then it goes on to give additional specifics.
So if the textbook is not approved, then it can't be on the substitution list afterwards.
Correct.
Mr. Cagle?
Maybe Jackie would know this, but since school started, chances are people won't be buying textbooks before the spring meeting. So if it were approved, it could be updated at the March meeting, whatever it is, because nobody's buying textbooks during the school year. If we wanted to approve it.
Right, I understand where you are. Then again, we're on blind faith as well.
They didn't really review that 2019 volume. It was provided to them, but it was not an official submission.
Right, so do we have any motion on that? Further discussion? We can have discussion before we take a motion. Right, so the options would be to deny, to accept, or to ask for revision, correct?
Or to ask for more information.
More information, not a revision. I'm sorry, my bad.
I move we deny the book because we can't use it. It didn't go through the review process, and I'm assuming the 2019 book and the current book didn't pass.
Any further discussion on that before we proceed? Jay?
Mr. Chairman, is there any opportunity, do we have a time frame for that this could still be substituted?
Somebody want to address that?
I don't know if Lacey or Lauren want to address this. It has not been my experience that we have allowed textbooks that have not been submitted through the full process to be submitted at the end of the process.
Thank you.
And Dr. Parton, if we go down that road, we've gone down that road. That would be a pretty busy highway. That could be a lot of extra work on the department, the readers, the reviewers, who, like we know, they're citizens, but also a group of teachers. Okay, so do we have a motion? Was that a motion, Mr. Cagle? That was a motion. So Mr. Cagle made a motion that we do not approve this one. Second? Okay, we do not have a second. Dr. Kirk?
I don't know if there's further information we need, but at our next meeting, we will have to either decide up or down on this title.
So I assume that we need a motion then to move this to the next meeting, defer action on this. Are we looking for any additional information? Ms. Kelsey?
Well, my question is, I'm not sure whether, how successful has this program ever been used in the state of Tennessee? And I noticed that 1 and 2 were passed. Am I correct? French 1 and 2, and then this one, I thought it sounded like it was just some, maybe even some illustrations that were not up to date, that it wasn't content. So I guess I would have a question on whether if this is a really great, effective program, should we deny it without having some extra information about it? Is it a current program? I mean, I don't know what
I think we
publisher
need
is
to-
used for French.
And I understand exactly what your ask is. I understand what you're saying, but we have to have action. We have to have a direction that we're going with, and I think we're all kind of floundering with what action we're going to take.
And I do have the question about not really having seen the real thing.
Okay. Dr. Kirk?
Could we ask the department to just provide clarity on, I know we have the spreadsheets, but if we could get something very simple, a matrix that shows these were the problems, this was the publisher's resolution, and exactly what happened after that. I don't know if it would be of benefit for them to get together or not. I don't know how many reviewers reviewed these titles.
Yes, I do believe this was just 2.
So that there's,
So there were 2 initial reviewers of this title, and then there were, in the appeals, that would be the same reviewers, I assume.
That's correct.
and did both reviewers reject the title?
Let me fact check
Okay.
that one for you. On the re-review of this particular title, one reviewer failed it.
Then my recommendation would be the same as we are doing for BE and Cengage, and I can put that in the form of a motion, that we would have the chair ask those 2 reviewers to work with the department to resolve the difference.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Dr. Park?
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay, and on we go. We move to Studies Weekly, I believe. Discussion? No, is that right? Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the department. Were the same reviewers used for K through 5 on this publisher? Were they doing grade banded reviews, or were they grade by grade?
Different review.
Let me verify.
Okay.
So on this one, it looks like we had majority of the reviewers who reviewed all of them. In a couple of grades, especially like the lower grades, there were 1 or 2 individuals that were different. For example, there's 2 people who reviewed a grade 2 that didn't review a grade 5.
And this was,
for Studies Weekly.
no, the one that we are in question of, 3, isn't it? 3? Okay. Discussion? What was the, okay.
So the grade 3 reviewers all reviewed at least one other grade band.
Mr. Chair. And there were 5 that reviewed the grade 3?
Correct.
And how many passed it the first time on initial review?
None.
And the appeals reviewers, the 2 of those?
There's 2 that passed and 3 that failed on the re-review.
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
There's 2 reviewers who passed and 3 reviewers who failed on the re-review.
Any further discussion?
I have a question about,
Yes, ma'am.
do you ever adopt different series for different grade levels? I mean, I was wondering about, if I understood it correctly, K1, 2, 4, 5 passed, and then third grade, because I didn't know whether,
Yes,
You
that,
ever adopt?
unless I'm mistaken, that is possible. It's happened in the past. We dealt with that last year, I believe.
But are you asking if districts do that?
Yes, and districts would do that as well.
say just for a
Correct, Dr.
particular
Clark.
grade level, say third grade, you'd have a different series from the other.
That's correct.
Because, Ms. Kelsey, if they were sticking to the standards, it wouldn't matter if you switched, resources or publishers, because they should all fall in line with the standards
standard.
anyway. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Chairman, this is just another option for the local districts to choose. This is not the only option.
Any other discussion? Any motion? Playing chess.
My issue, Mr. Chairman, is I was pretty impressed with it, to be honest with you. And so is there any way that we could ask the staff to go back and relook at this and put it on next month's agenda? Again, I'm new at this, so I may be speaking out of.
Yes, you could present a motion to defer with more information.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to defer this issue till the next board meeting.
With the request of more information
Yes, please,
from.
thank you. Please.
Can we,
What information are you
That's-
would you like
right,
us to?
we need to
compile?
guide the department as to which way to go on this.
Is,
Okay.
of the 3 that didn't pass, what was really the outliers, the reasoning that it wasn't passed?
So you would like us to pull together a matrix that would make it easier for you
Please.
to look at just those reviewers? Because all of it's provided, but we can make it in a
Right.
format that'd be easier for you to compare.
Okay, so we have a motion. Dr. Park?
I second it.
Ms. Kelsey, second.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay, thank you. And last, McGraw-Hill. Discussion.
Mr.
And-
Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Dr. Kirk.
I'm sure there were 5 reviewers on this as it was a core title, but I do sense some conflicting feedback to the publisher on this review, and I wonder if we could have some kind of resolution for this one, because 6 and 8 passed. This is very similar to what happened with the science text last time. I don't know. I'm not in the business of making work for the department, but I would like to see some resolution. The fact that many of them didn't think there was extraneous information, but 1 or 2 of them did in different areas, to have them be able to resolve those discrepancies, I think would be helpful.
I suppose I have a problem with extraneous information. I mean, if it's information that's worthwhile and the student learns it, I mean, I know we're teaching to the test, but, I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, or if it's extraneous, doesn't mean that you have to cover it in your class. You can say, read this, and, you know, that this is extraneous, and we can go through that. I mean, that never happens in books in a library, right? We read every word.
Have a bonus question.
Yeah.
I-
Dr. Kirk.
I would say that in some cases that it can be problematic. If you've got a math text and there's just a lot of extra information in there that's not on target, it makes it more difficult for the teacher to really teach what they're supposed to sometimes. So the textbook is meant to be an aid to the teacher to teach what the standards are. So too much extra information can be problematic. I do think that this publisher talked about placing history in context, and I think that that's a rationale. Can I ask the department one more question?
Absolutely, I've got one. You're probably going to ask the same one.
Maybe. So the question I have is, when the reviewers reviewed this, did the publishers have the opportunity to present what they presented to us today to them, or was it they just submitted and then the reviewers reviewed? How did that look?
Do you mean in the publisher hearing?
Yes, when they brought their materials back for appeal to the reviewers, did they present the fact that this is why we put this material in here to the reviewers?
Yes, so each publisher who was at the publisher hearing was allowed 15 minutes to present their content changes, their feedback sheets. Those are the sheets with the yellow and blue columns in it, outlining here are the areas of comments that we addressed, and here's where the content is located. And so they had 15 minutes to do that. They were allowed to hand out any additional materials with the actual changes in the books and any online references to where they could find that change online.
Is that done in a person-to-person meeting?
That's correct.
If the word extraneous in their reviews, if wherever that is, like with reviewer 3237, okay, I'm sorry, I'm on that first page in the reviewer's comments. Okay, if those two were not a part of this, what would have happened? I'm putting you on the spot, I know that, but as far as the review, how would that have gone?
I would have to examine that to see if there were, some reviewers made comments such as, just for example, extraneous content, and didn't necessarily mark no, that it didn't meet the standard. And in some cases, they may have done that. They may have marked no because of the extraneous content. And so it just depends on the reviewer. And I think that's what McGraw-Hill is saying here, that the reviewers aren't agreeing but you have to remember they can't speak to each other, so they're not necessarily going to agree. So it makes sense in some respects why one reviewer notices something that another one doesn't. And I think with the extraneous content, if I recall correctly, I do remember one reviewer making that such a comment, and I only remember that one reviewer saying that.
I think there were 2 reviewers that said extraneous content, but they each had a different thing they thought was extraneous. So what do you do?
Dr. Kirk?
So one thing that I want to note for us, because I've been thinking a lot about this since I started reviewing all this material since it came into my inbox, is that these reviewers cannot consult. It is by statute that they do not consult or arrive at consensus, but that really is our job, to look out as a commission. We can look out across this and see if there's a problem, and so I think it's appropriate that we would note these issues and then send back for specific things to be relooked at in a way that the chair has leeway to do within the statute.
And under direction of the chair, they could consult then. Okay. Any further discussion? Motions? Dr. Carr?
I would make a motion that, at the direction of the chair, we have the reviewers resolve some of the conflicts that we see here in the feedback.
To come to consensus.
To come some kind of consensus, or at least resolve it in some way that they could bring further information back to us for our next meeting.
Second?
I second.
Mr. Cagle, second. Vote?
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay, so we've kicked the can down the road on everything. And I think we need to be very cognitive of the fact that we've given the department work to do. We've given the reviewers work to do. Everybody's got work to do. We need to make decisions at the next meeting for sure. And a lot of extra travel for people, and we need to move forward on this. So thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Chair Rise.
in all fairness, this is a big decision to make, and the reason why that I want all the information that I can have, and for me, some of us just got appointed, and that's the reason why that I'm taking a step back and trying to evaluate everything before I make this decision.
Absolutely, and I agree 100%. These are very serious considerations that we're making, and as has been pointed out, at some time that means that one person, in their opinion, is pretty decisive there. It makes a big difference, and to have some collaboration and discussion is a good thing, which is what we as a commission have asked for those people to do. So thank you for that comment.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Kirk?
I'd like to ask Lacey and Lauren if they're clear and if they have any questions for us before we move into the action items.
I would like to clarify for each publisher what our next steps are.
Absolutely.
So my understanding for BE Publishing is that we will reach out to the reviewers, the 2 reviewers, and we will see if they can come to consensus and bring those remarks back to you. For Pearson, my understanding is that we need to pull that information into a matrix in a way that's easily, so you can easily read it, a transparency tool, if you will, so that you have an easy way to compare the comments. For Cengage, my understanding is that we need to reach out to the 2 reviewers and have them reach consensus, and we'll bring those remarks back to you. For EMC Publishing, I think this one maybe had 2, a clarity matrix and the 2 reviewer comments, but my notes might be incorrect here.
So on this one, I only had to have the reviewers reconvene together and come to a conclusion.
Thank you for that clarification.
The one that we voted on is that the department provides a matrix about the reviewer information.
Is that on the EMC?
Yes.
Oh, I had written down, I had it the other way, so maybe we
I
need
think
some
that's why I
clarity.
had 2 notes. I think there were multiple discussions, but Rachel's saying the vote was on the matrix.
We might have to redo that then, because the one that I wrote down to officially pass is that the department provides a matrix about reviewer information.
Okay, so we're going to revisit EMC to get
And
clarity.
We are in the form of a matrix, or do we need to do a new vote
That's what
for
I
the
mean.
2 reviewers?
We're gonna revisit that here in just a
Oh,
second
sorry.
to figure out what your direction is. Before we do that, can we finish on the last 2 and make sure that we're clear on that?
For Studies Weekly, I have the matrix being our next steps, and then for McGraw-Hill, I have the reaching out to the 2 reviewers and bringing back their consensus remarks.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to EMC. Anybody happen to remember who made the motion?
Dr. Kirk made the motion and Jack Parton second.
Okay, Dr. Kirk, you made the motion. The motion was?
Excuse me. I didn't realize I put it in the form. Are you talking about this?
Oh,
You're talking about
No,
Ms.
Vicki
Kirk.
did. You made the motion. Yes, ma'am.
Well, what I have written on my notes are, I wrote down 2. And so I thought that because I found that there were 2, that I wanted to do that, to do the same thing we had done where we had always, with the others, that we had done 2 reviewers, so.
Looking for the consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so
Which
may
is-
I amend my motion or change? May I retract it and revote, or how shall we do that, Joanna?
That's,
Mhm.
that's what my memory serves, but let's just be totally clear, and Joanna's looking, she'll see what we do. We'll make sure we get it right.
I have one other question about that. Is the 2019 edition in existence, but just not published? Is that correct?
I think it's actually published. I think that some of the reviewers were given copies by the publisher to show them that the new edition would have what they wanted in there. However, it is not the title that is submitted. So it wasn't
Could-
ready when the process started,
But it is now.
but it is now, and we can't restart the process. Right.
Is that, you would agree with that statement? Okay. Thank you.
This is my last question. So if we were to adopt that, we would be adopting 2014 with revisions. Correct.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Believe that you would need to present it as a modification of your earlier motion, and then we would vote again.
I would like to modify my motion for EMC Publishing, removing the request that the department develop a matrix and including that the two reviewers be brought together to achieve some kind of resolution to their feedback.
So we have a motion from Dr. Kirk.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second from Jackie.
Just so I'm clear that I'm writing this down right, you want the two reviewers to be brought together to make a decision about, okay. Kay Kelsey.
Yes.
Frank Cagle.
Yes.
Dr. Kirk.
Yes.
Neil Durbin.
Yes.
Jack Parton.
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
And I think technically the term is reconsideration of the motion, but I think that the intention of the commission has been expressed, that this is replaces the earlier motion.
Okay. So have we concluded your synopsis? We good? The commission's good with that? Okay. Then we move on to our action items. There's a recommendation for the Section D bid list on first read. These would be the ones that passed on the first read. Any discussion? Okay, motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve all the first read list.
Thank you, Dr. Park. Second.
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman.
Kay Kelsey.
Yes.
Frank Cagle.
Yes.
Dr. Kirk.
Yes.
Neil Durbin.
Yes.
Jack Parton.
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Thank you. Our next item, under B on your list, the Tennessee textbooks and instructional materials for the adoption of Schedule Section E, first and final read. Any discussion? Dr. Part? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you turning it off?
I was trying to learn to use this thing again.
You can practice later. Need a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we approve action item number B for Tennessee textbook and instructional materials adoption Schedule E.
Thank you. Dr. Parton? Ms. Kelsey?
Second.
Second. Ms. Kelsey?
Kay Kelsey.
Yes.
Frank Cagle.
Yes.
Dr. Kirk.
Yes.
Neil Durbin.
Yes.
Jack Parton.
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Thank you. Action item C, Special Populations Addition to Section E. Dr. Parton?
Mr. Chairman, this is probably one of the action items that I'm the most excited about. It's
Absolutely.
long overdue, and I've dealt in special education for many, many years, and this is something that we've needed for many years. And the staff is to be applauded, and I would happily make this motion.
Thank you. Dr. Parton has a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Ms. Bowman?
And just to make a note, we'll be changing special populations to alternate academic instructional materials. Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Thank you. We're to D, the Section E screening instruments for ELA, special populations if approved in CTE, first and final read. Discussion? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we pass section D, item D.
Okay, and Mr. Cagle has made a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would second.
Dr. Parton has a second.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Move down to action item E, evidence guides on the first read. Discussion? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to entertain the motion on action item E, evidence guides, first read.
We have a motion. Dr. Parton?
Second.
Ms. Kelsey, we have a second.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
And letter F, we have the transparency tool on the first read. Discussion? And motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve item F on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. We have a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman.
Kay Kelsey,
Yes.
Frank Cagle,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Neil Durbin,
Yes.
Jack Parton,
Yes.
Michelle Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 yeses.
Okay, and we move to item 8, announcements and notices. First of all, Jackie, I just would like to reiterate an agreement, total agreement with the importance of what we do and that we need to proceed with all knowledge that we can attain. And so thank you again for that comment. Okay, our meeting, we have a meeting that's set on October the 10th, and I assume that we're looking for a meeting date in the spring. Lacey, you want to propose or speak to that?
Yes, so we have checked your respective districts' spring holiday schedules, and March 26th through the 28th is a very short window of time in which none of you had conflicting spring break dates. So we're proposing that a date be selected between March 26th through the 28th for the spring meeting.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yes. Personally, for discussion purposes, I need to stay away from that Wednesday. If anybody has a particular date in mind. Okay. Tuesday's a good day, guys. The 26th, Lacey?
That works for me, if it works for you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Jackie?
I do not have my schedule in front of me, so can you imagine that?
No, I really cannot. A director of schools walking around with that as schedule, yeah.
I would have to say tentatively, that would be fine.
Okay.
We can always bring it up again on October 10th so
True.
you can look.
So tentative date of the 26th, pending Jackie's approval. There we go. Okay, any other business? Okay, I'll take a motion that we adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle.
Second.
And we have a second. We are adjourned. Thank you.